conundrum is, does Jockster Goes to Stuttgart count? Because if it does, then Christy Moore has to go up. And actually, we want to create a little bit of tourism and some jobs, especially in the current environment. And I don't actually see any reason not to put Christy Moore on Kildare's Mount Rushmore. Come and knock me off my perch, people of Kildare, and tell me that I'm wrong. If you want to get involved in the conversation this morning, you can WhatsApp us. 087 180 180 is the number. We've got a very, very busy show lined up for you today. Going to check in with Ronan O'Gara to see how things are going in France at the moment. We're going to do Meath's Mount Rushmore. Hector hEochagáin is going to join us and Tommy to correct Tommy's 4 and edit one person off it. And we'll also get Mickey Burke's take on what he thinks of Tommy's view, and maybe make one last minute pitch for somebody else to be included. If you'd like your own pitch, you can use the hashtag OTB AM on any of our social media channels. And we're also going to speak with Professor Sam McConkey. Obviously last night John Horan came out and essentially said that there's not really a high likelihood of there being significant GAA action until social distancing, and said there won't be any until social distancing is no longer a feature. And a lot of people are kind of responding this morning, 14 hours on from that, going, social distancing is going to be with us for a while. So what are the repercussions of what John Horan said last night in terms of the amount of GAA action that we're going to see over the course of 2020, and how soon into 2021 before it kind of gets to a point where we're comfortable that there will be people in stadiums? So all that coming up on OTB AM for you. First of all, I want to play you this. It's from Saturday afternoon. The lads have been luxuriating in World Cups past. They've done some very, very brilliant World Cups. They've had big, in-depth conversations about glorious football. You think France 98, you think 2006. 2010, not a World Cup that people have very fond memories of the quality of the football, but that did not prevent a brilliant conversation from happening. Here's Dan, Johnny and John Duggan. Have a look.
Because the thing about that World Cup was that not a lot of people, not many countries had big travelling supports with them. There was a lot of fears around security in South Africa. And again, we might just touch on that maybe later around the whole tournament. But they didn't travel in great numbers. But England did. That's the exception. But they said there was these boos when they played really badly. So their tournament was just miserable. They got through against Slovenia. John Terry did a header off the line and was Captain Braveheart and all of this. But really they were flagging. They were flagging badly. And while they were unlucky with Lampard, they were tired against Germany and they were done. And they were beaten by a younger team and a happier looking team. And to be honest, the whole thing was an abject failure. But maybe Capello was too full on for tournament mode and didn't know how to loosen up. And maybe things might have panned out differently, but I'm not even that sure if they would have.
I think with England, a lot of it might have had to do with the Premier League and the rivalry between certain clubs, and that certain club players didn't get on. That was generally the feeling I would have had over that golden generation. I felt 2018, they probably had a lesser quality group of individuals, but they had a better team spirit under Southgate, and maybe that's
they had the darts.
Yeah,
didn't play enough darts in 2010,
Yeah, and they had a better, a kind of a nicer sheen to them in 2018. This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk with John Duggan. You can text us on 53106. Your memories, your thoughts of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, won by Spain 10 years on. It wasn't the best World Cup, I would have to say, but we need to take an ad break. Back to talk more about it in a moment.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
This week on Taking Stock, how should the Eurozone and central banks deal with the COVID shockwave in the immediate and longer terms? We're joined by former Governor of the Irish Central Bank, Patrick Honohan. And before the COVID crisis hit, and long after it's gone presumably, corporate sustainability is being seen as the most significant economic transition in history. We hear from David Blood, co-founder of Generation Investment with former US Vice President Al Gore.
Taking Stock with Vincent Wall.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now, or tune in Sunday mornings at 10.
On News Talk.
My name is Denise Cusick, Community Protection Advisor with Ulster Bank. As the world around us changes, we've made some changes in response. In all our branches, we've introduced social distancing, as well as priority hours until 11 a.m. for our elderly and vulnerable customers. Meanwhile, all personal and business customers can continue to access our banking services and features online through our mobile app and telephone support teams. Ulster Bank. Help for what matters. Online and mobile banking criteria applies. Ulster Bank Ireland Act is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
QuoteDevil.ie can save you money on your car insurance, van insurance or home insurance. Quote Devil Home Insurance is so easy. Get a quote in just 60 seconds and purchase cover in 3 minutes.
The Quote Devil's always got one hell of a quote.
Quote Devil Limited is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
With Virgin Mobile, there's nothing hidden. Now you can try unlimited 4G data, calls and texts for only €15 a month for 12 months. All on a 30-day contract. And better yet, everyone can try it. It's an offer that's bigger than big. See virginmobile.ie. Virgin Mobile. Nothing hidden.
Fair usage and T's and C's apply. €25 a month after offer. Ends 3rd of June 2020.
In 1940, in Oak Park,
our great-granny Brett had 4 sons.
Hungry fellas.
So she set them to growing corn to feed the pigs, which were raised and cured in Oak Park.
Now we 2 brothers,
John and David,
still craft insanely good rashers here in Tipperary, from field to fry-up, like great-granny used to make.
And then add some new twists, like great-granny didn't used to make.
Oak Park. Real rashers rediscovered.
You could start an online palm reading course. Or skip that and quickly go to Choosy from the Irish Independent. Choosy.ie is a new price comparison site where you could find a better deal for your gas and electricity in a few quick clicks, saving you more than €400 a year. A much better use of your time. Choosy, you have nothing to lose. Visit choosy.ie. Research by the Commission for the Regulation of Utilities showed the average Irish household that switched their dual fuel tariffs every year saved €1,696 over 4 years. Terms and conditions apply.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Eoin.
You are welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you 3 to 5 o'clock in the company of the Irish Independent football correspondent Daniel McDonnell and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. Remember to text us on 53106. @Off the Ball is our handle on Twitter for your messages. We're also streaming live as well, so you can watch us on Periscope, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. You can listen to us on the Go Lad app. We're speaking about football and the World Cup of 2010 today. Our football coverage brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. So we have a really good text in here on 53106. A first World Cup on the continent of Africa, and that was fantastic. But vuvuzelas were an absolute assault on the senses. Never in the history of watching sport and TV has something so utterly annoying become so centre stage. Yeah, might be over the top, but it ruined the World Cup for me. That is from RJ in Donabate.
When you're talking about the when I'm talking about the 1998 Galway win the All-Ireland, in those days the old foghorns were all the rage, but they seem to have completely fallen off the scene for whatever reason. And the foghorns were mildly annoying, but the vuvuzelas, I mean, what were they thinking? I just it did absolutely nothing for atmosphere. There were a couple of things as well about that World Cup. I mean, I couldn't say it was a particularly memorable World Cup at all. And albeit it's, again, slightly worrying. I can't remember where I was for the Henri handball, but I certainly don't remember watching or have great memories of that World Cup. But the other thing, when we were talking about Mexico and the unbelievable sunshine, that World Cup was played in completely different conditions, and it was almost like the spectacle itself. Just I'd be interested to know what Dan found, obviously having been there. But between the vuvuzelas, the kind of indifferent quality of the football at times, and just how it looked on TV, it probably ranks as one of the least memorable.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna mount my defence of the vuvuzela here now, because it was something that annoyed me at the time. Listen, when you're in the stadiums, you couldn't hear yourself think, and the occasional time where there was a goal, I'm not gonna lie, like there was that element of like paradise for like a couple of seconds where that ringing sound was gone, and then maybe like halfway through the competition you become slightly immune to it. But I have to say, like, there is an element of, you bring a World Cup to Africa, well, then don't complain if it's an African World Cup. You know, if the sounds might be equivalent to a South African World Cup, an African World Cup. Now, like, this is the thing. I can completely understand why, for a TV audience, it was hard going, why the games were hard going. Now, I happen to think that the ball, the Jabulani, which was blown all around the place, and maybe altitude and just some teams not being in a good place probably contributed to the competition being disappointing more so than the vuvuzelas. But when the games were turgid at times and you just had this soundtrack there, it probably it wound people up. But I certainly remember being there, going into one of the townships, and the Niall Mellon Fund were doing stuff over there, and I've gone into one of the townships in Cape Town it was, although I spent most of the tournament in Johannesburg. But got into one in Cape Town, and all the young kids were like running around with their vuvuzelas, you know, blowing their vuvuzelas, because like that's what they do, you know, that is something that is part of their match going experience. And there is something a little bit white European about, well, we'll bring the World Cup to your place, but just don't behave as you might. Now, at the same time, I'm not immune to like the imperfections of the fact that most of those football supporting people within South Africa couldn't actually go to the games, and they weren't necessarily, it wasn't as accessible for them as it should have been, and like there's complexities about South Africa as a place. But like people who are going to the stadium with their Vuvuzela, like that is their experience, and I thought after a time it's just a bit ignorant to be going on about it. I mean, this is part. I have my. I must say here, I have my.
Oh, you have it.
I have one, right? So there is a story behind.
Blow, Dan. Go on.
There's a story behind it, because it turns out it actually is ornamental rather than an actual Vuvuzela, which I discovered after a time trying to have a go at it. But see, I do want to just, while we're roughly on the subject of local traditions now, I mean, you can't underestimate that there was a symbolic aspect to the World Cup going to Africa and South Africa. Now, it is tied in, unfortunately, with FIFA and Sepp Blatter and the rise of football. It goes hand in hand with corruption and a lot of things. But there were still things from that tournament that did strike me very much. It was the first World Cup I went to, and maybe that's why I have a little bit more graw for it, even though you can't really defend it from a footballing point of view. But like a lot of people went to South Africa thinking that this was a no-go zone, that like you were going to be in real trouble. Like I was reading stuff before going about if people don't even stop at traffic lights in Johannesburg because you get mugged or something will happen to you. And I even remember getting the first taxi in out of the airport and almost being a bit jittery, thinking what's going to happen when there's traffic lights here and they're going red and all this stuff that would be in your head. But it did mean a lot to the people that were there that the tournament was being brought there, even though it wasn't ready in many respects. Some of the stadiums were half finished. Like I remember when the South Africa's opening game was being played, and I was actually in Cape Town for the France match, but there was like staff actually in tears, like just in tears, and they were like locals for a lot of the lowly paid jobs will be done by members of like the black community there, and the vast majority of them, but they were still in tears at the fact that the eyes of the world were on their country. And that's probably why over time I sort of became quite attached to some of the local stuff, the quirks, even if they were annoying to everyone else. But I stayed with a family in Johannesburg, and now they were like a white family from the sort of the wealthy minority that were there, but they actually really adopted us. It was myself and Dion Fanning who ended up in this sort of, it wasn't even a regular B&B, it was a guest house that was a spillover, and they accommodated 2 extra Irish journalists from another house. They were completely lastminute.com. Will you take these 2 journalists for the tournament? And they went completely over the top in terms of their generosity, and they basically gave us their house and all stayed in their small rooms and gave us all their main rooms. But like for the entire tournament, we were treated like kings. They're meant to be bread and breakfast. They cooked all our meals. They were just so welcoming and very happy to welcome us to their country, but also explaining the quirks of their country. Like they all lived in gated communities, very suspicious and fears about crime and so on. And they were very progressive and open-minded. Not everyone around them might have been the same, but it's a quite a place. And the World Cup coming there was a big deal. And I even remember the day of the final, the headline in the local paper was, they saw, we conquered, in the sense that there was a fear that it was going to be such a disaster that there would be loads of like instances of crime and people being, falling into bad. Now, as we've spoken about this, John, previously with Brazil and with Russia, that when the tournament comes in, different rules apply. But still, there was a symbolism in South Africa hosting that tournament. And we might talk about with Ghana as well. But on my last day, because they just, like Brenda, these people, they were incredible to us. Myself and Dion were presented with a gift on our last day, which was a specially commissioned tricolour Vuvuzela with our names carved into it. So I always have this piece of the South Africa World Cup with me as I go around. But that is why my memories of the tournament, I would say, are slightly different to people who are watching the games at home that were hard going. I fully accept that. It's a fair point. 2
questions. How much is a Vuvuzela? And secondly, what do you think the legacy is 10 years later for South Africa? For young people who were, young kids at the time, has there been a positive legacy?
Yeah, it's two great questions. Well, how much is Vuvuzela? Very freely available over there. as you could tell. As I said, even in the poorer townships, like all the young kids are just running around like, just blowing their vuvuzelas, and that's what they're doing, that's I've watched around the time I remember watching South African League football to see, like, was it as prevalent in the games there, and like it was to a degree, but it obviously took off around that World Cup, as annoying as it was for everyone else. In terms of and I do actually recall afterwards, Bray Wanderers released a statement saying they were banning vuvuzelas from the Carlisle grounds. So like, were people perhaps fearing that it was going to become a global phenomenon? I'm not so sure about that. In terms of the legacy for the country, well, unfortunately, there's a slight sadness in that I think there would have been great hope around that time. People talk about sort of Invictus and the World Cup in 1995 and Rugby World Cup and what that symbolised, and there was obviously a hope that the Football World Cup in 2010 could almost have a similar impact to some degree. I remember Mandela suffered a bereavement around the time, and there would have been quite a local scepticism that he would have been wheeled out for the final, but maybe he wasn't in great shape, and there would have been, unfortunately, the South African government of the time, which might have started off as representing great hope, didn't turn out to be what people hoped it would be. So I would say some of the problems that exist in South Africa then firmly exist now. It was a very, I have to say, to me, like, and maybe there's people who go on rugby tours all the time who to South Africa who didn't find it unusual, but like, I just found it so strange to see how, in particular Johannesburg, just how different their way of life is. I mean, the people that we were with who are, the small white minority there, they drive absolutely everywhere. I didn't walk basically during that tournament. You were told not to walk anywhere. In fact, to reassure us on the first day or two, our host, basically, we were both given like an alarm, an alarm system, and we pressed it for a test. And she said, Brenda, our host, said, give it 15 seconds here. So come out to the front. And this was to reassure us that we weren't going to be in trouble. And next time, this van pulled up outside, and these 6 to 8 bouncers, like they were Angolan big bouncers, jumped out, ready for action. She said, sorry, lads, just a false alarm. But that was like the day-to-day existence that, was their normality. And obviously that's a product of like a horrendous state that existed before that, which created it. But like, to see in particular Johannesburg and the suspicion and divide, and it was only on our last week, we were thinking, is this a bit over the top? Because this actually does feel quite safe, even though we're driving everywhere and we're not taking any real precautions. And she only said to us at the end, listen, I didn't even want to say it to you, but one of our neighbours had been shot dead in his swimming pool not that long ago, in an attack. So everyone who went there, and that's why so many fans and supporters didn't go, in particular because most of the games were in Johannesburg because they had 2 stadiums, but people just thought it would be a complete no-go zone. And like, unfortunately, you read about South Africa today. I don't think, like, the problems that were there then have changed. But at the same time, it's not one of these. I appreciate that the FIFA Roadshow comes around and they throw money at White Elephant stadiums and then they head off and they leave some debts. And it's like, well, why did they bring it here? I do understand that. But there was a genuine joy and pride at the same time from a lot of the locals we encountered in the poorer areas that the tournament was there. Like, I still don't, like, I wouldn't, as much as there's a cynicism around the whole FIFA machine, and there was a genuine joy on the ground there. And even for, like, Ghana nearly reached the semi-finals of the World Cup. And I remember Brenda, our host, being very emotional. I wrote about this during the week around the Suarez game, being unbelievably emotional about the fact that because she was very progressively minded, and her 3 white children were cheering for Ghana. And they were identifying with the African team as one of their own, which wouldn't be a massively, there would have been sections of the community that might have been thinking that way, but that represented hope, and that represented some hope of progress. And we've seen South Africa with the Rugby World Cup, and you hope that there's a more inclusive environment there. But I certainly was struck very much by the place and the quirks of the place, and it's a complex country. But it's a beautiful country, and there was some people there who still loved having the World Cup there, even if, not everything about it was perfect.
Dan, I think we need to give you a glass of water after that brilliant summation of South Africa. I think you'd agree with that, John.
That was incredible. That was like running 2 marathons in half an hour or something. You got an awful lot in there, and it's just deeply frustrating listening to all that. You know, I obviously would have just my vague kind of impressions of what South Africa might be like, and obviously it's a deeply divided society. But you know, whatever the, I suppose, background behind South Africa winning the vote and so on, which plenty has been written about since. You know, bringing a World Cup to South Africa, there's an awful lot of good intention to that, and there's an awful lot of potential good coming out of it. And to think what they're doing with the next World Cup, you know, it's just sickening to think that, you know, a country that basically could be benefiting hugely and could progress and could make some use of these stadiums, but instead we're going to go to Qatar.
Dan, eloquent as ever as putting the World Cup in context. That is from Fergal in Dundalk. Lads, I was at Punchestown the year after the South African World Cup, was having a terrible day with the bookies until the bumper. I picked King Vuvuzela. It romped home at 28 to 1.
Good horse, actually.
Up the Vuvuzelas from Richard in Kildare.
Thanks to JP Lonergan, who texted in last week and has texted in again to suggest that he met me in Doyle's on Fleet Street after the Henri ball. So that would narrow it down potentially to Bowes or Mulligan. So hopefully by the end of the show, I'll remember where I was for it anyway.
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't let that pass. That Johnny did describe 1990, 2002 and 2009 as these symbolic events that like stopped the nation. He just doesn't remember where he was. You know, It's meant to be like a who shot JFK, where were you at that moment? You know,
it's
Johnny
disappointing, I'm not going to lie.
I've told you where I was. It was 1990, the Sheepskin Rug in the house. 2006 was Doyle's. I was in Doyle's, Italy.
What about 02 though? Well, like the morning of the games in
2002 was my baptism of fire as a radio journalist, in that I came in to work as a 23-year-old, a little bit kind of, I'd been out the night before, and I was told by the receptionist that Roy Keane been sent home.
Oh, so I'm looking. We'll have to just do 02 again.
We're doing 2002 on the 23rd of May, which was the Tuesday of Saipan.
Ah, very good. I feel we won't use up all our
listeners.
Use up all our lines.
We've got 2 weeks to wait for it, because I think that's going to be quite an incendiary show. Because I don't know, I'm definitely was in mixed camp. All I remember from 2010 was the GBH style fouling. That is from P and Greystones. We'll get to that after 4.
You mentioned Mick featured prominently in BBC's co-commentary in the 2010 World Cup, which is something I'd forgotten as well, but only realised today. I suppose little did we think that he would have been hopefully planning to send Ireland to the Euros 10 years later, but there you are.
Jeremy Hayes on Twitter. I was in Pretoria for a few days before the World Cup. The Vuvuzelas broke my heart. They were going all day and all night. Didn't get a wink of sleep. But Dan put a kind of good context on that, and that is definitely interesting, because I think soccer was the sport of the black community in South Africa, whereas rugby was the sport of the white community. I was sitting in my company's office in Canary Wharf in London watching France on my computer screen be knocked out of the 2010 World Cup. The cheer that went up when France were knocked out was fantastic. We had a lot of support after the Henri incident. That is from Philip in Athenry. Len Hall on Twitter watched the England-Germany 2010 game at a hotel in the Dominican Republic with 300 England fans. Didn't care who won, but listening to the silence of sad English fans was heaven itself. Great show, guys. That is from Len in Wexford. Thanks so much, Len. Hi, guys. Not my main memory, but one memory from the World Cup was North Korea beating Brazil 2-1 in the group stage. I believe North Korea's supreme leader then showed this to the North Koreans as the final and told them they'd won the World Cup. That is from Ronan O'Gara. I heard as well, though, guys, that the manager was sent to a building site to work without pay after the 7-0 defeat. I heard that the 7-0 defeat was the one they showed on TV. This
was a kind of a strange experience watching. One of the notable recollections of the World Cup is like genuinely fearing for people's lives when North Korea conceded a goal, and it was kind of like you're watching the goalkeeper who had a pretty bad game obviously against Portugal, and you're just like, yeah, you know, in Ireland now we go to the pub and, you know, he'd kind of be mocked or whatever, but like you're dealing with, there was so much rumour and innuendo, but God knows what happened to that North Korean squad afterwards, to be honest.
Yeah, it was just, I don't think Kim Jong-un was there. I think his father was still in.
The father, he might have been. Well, it's funny, I remember during that tournament in South Africa, again, because I was given this wing of the house, so I was able to get the channels, all like global channels. I watched Graham McDowell won the US Open, which was during that tournament. But of course, if Kim Jong-il had turned up, like, you know, there's no way McDowell would have got the job done. You know, because Kim Jong-il was more of a golf enthusiast maybe than a football man, wasn't
Basketball, he's a basketball guy. He brought Dennis Rodman, remember?
That's Kim Jong-un you're thinking of.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting mixed up my uns and my ills.
Yeah, he was shot 34, I think, around Pyongyang Golf Club. Yeah,
he did.
You know, not for the front nine, for the 18, I think it was. So
yeah, and that well-known golf course in Pyongyang, of course.
But they have a massive football stadium apparently in Pyongyang.
They do. It's utterly unbelievable.
Players probably built it.
Yeah, well, if you watch I watched lots of documentaries on North Korea, and the most recent ones show that the current leader has actually done quite a bit of modernising, which is quite staggering, and people are getting in maybe a little bit kind of easier. But if you can get some footage of a North Korea game in Pyongyang and watch the uniformity of the colours of the communist crowds and how absolutely hysterical they get when the ball goes into the opposition half, it's a sight to behold. I can't imagine what it's like to be at a game over there.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to see that in Ireland around that area, you'd go to an FEI AGM, though. You know, but anyway, different time.
Okay. Wish from Tanya McDonald here on Off the Ball Saturday. Dan, how many games did you go to?
I'm not sure, actually. It was one of those ones where, because there was two stadiums in Johannesburg, there was Ellis Park and then there was Soccer City, and like Ellis Park was in the old town as such, and you get dropped off near this, I think it was one of the biggest sort of blocks of flats in the world, and it was a bit more, you know, earthy around there, whereas Soccer City was like the big brand new FIFA one. So yeah, I got to quite a few games, but I can't remember. A couple of us rented a sort of a minibus to travel to Bloemfontein for the Germany-England game, and would have gone to Pretoria and Rustenburg by road a lot. So I got more games in that tournament than previous ones. There wasn't that much flying. I went to Durban for the Spain-Germany semi-final, and I went to Port Elizabeth for a Slovenia-England game. But as I said, it was a strange experience. It wasn't that hard to get around because, as I said, there wasn't really that many fans, like huge volumes of travelling support. And you know, Rio in 2014 and even elements of Moscow in 2018, you would see fans of countries, you know, mingling around the place. But there wasn't as much of that in 2010. Maybe in Cape Town where people could walk around more. Johannesburg was built around Sandton, but there wasn't really that sort of fan experience maybe that you would have elsewhere. Okay. But there was drivable aspects to it. So I got quite a few games. I don't even remember how many there was.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
This is OTB Sports Radio, Thursday Night Football with John Giles.
When you lose a big match like that, you have to suck that up. But to go into a dressing room and say you're celebrating to it, disrespectful. I mean, who is Mourinho to talk about disrespect?
The best analysis of all the week's football from Ireland's #1 football man.
Pogba's a social media star. Right, he appeals to the young people now. He does his dance, he has his hair and all that. That's all he's worried about, in my opinion. Not worried about being a great player, Nathan.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
All right, you're very welcome back. If you've got any memories of the 2010 World Cup that you'd like to share with us, you can WhatsApp us 087 180 180. Myself and Eoin Sheahan with you every morning from 7:30 until 10. Eoin, how was your weekend? Was it good?
It actually was, yeah. It consisted of just sitting outside in the back garden doing not very much at all. So I think a lot of people have done the very same thing. And I guess we're lucky that is what our lockdown is confined to, that we can actually enjoy that for a couple of days.
The 5K and 2K, did it make much of a difference for the ability for you to perambulate around the environs of North County Dublin? No,
it didn't. My 2K was good and solid already, so it's actually made little to no difference, actually. Although the sea now does come into
I was going to say, you've got a whole beach. You've got like a fantastic beach right on your doorstep. You're like, nah.
It's a good point, yeah. Well, the back garden is just as appealing because there is literally no one else there. And the beaches are pretty busy, Ger. The seaside is not a place where you can be guaranteed to social distance.
Social distancing was the theme of the weekend. Obviously, John Horan went on the Sunday game last night and spoke about the fact that the GAA won't be coming back until social distancing is not a factor. And I mean, obviously, first off, He got a lot of praise for his performance last night, people saying it was a very clear message, very straightforward. They're not going to put on the volunteers of the organisation the responsibility for policing social distancing. And you completely understand that this is an amateur organisation. There had been a school of thought that believed that for local club matches it would actually be not that difficult to keep people in the crowd social distance. Because if you look at the language from the phasing that we've been talking about over the last while, Phase 3 was going to permit behind closed doors sporting activities events where arrangements are in place to enable participants to maintain social distancing. So that's most non-contact sports returning from June 29th. Phase 4 was permit sports team leagues and in brackets, for example, soccer and GAA, but only where limitations are placed on the numbers of spectators and where social distancing can be maintained. Now the language in the recommendation is a little bit flabby there, because is it social distancing for the players in the field or is it social distancing for the people in the crowd? I mean, I'd assumed from the language that it was people in the crowd and that they were actually going to be okay with people bumping into each other on the pitch. And that's where a lot of the concern has come. But if you go back to Dr. Eoin Falvey last week, and he was saying there's a difference between contact in a medical sense and a contact sport. A contact sport is not contact in a medical sense. According to the World Health Organization, it's 15 minutes in close contact within a 2-metre radius of somebody who is infected. And it's unlikely that you would have a full 15 minutes in rugby, for example. They were saying maybe GAA is different because actually you'll be marking somebody over the course of 60 minutes in a club game.
Yeah, it's interesting that there is an actual medical professional on the record as saying that there is a clear difference between social distancing on the pitch and social distancing in the stands. It is interesting as well looking at that roadmap document and kind of wondering if that phase 4 line is to do with on the pitch or off the pitch. You get the sense that it is definitely to do with spectators, because when you get into phase 5, it actually specifies that close physical contact games would be permitted. That's the rugby, boxing, wrestling, that sort of thing. But then in the crowd, you would need to have effective social distancing being maintained. So that's the kind of the distinguishment that's been made there. And like I wonder if there is a situation where the GAA do actually consider what other sports bodies might do over the next couple of months and reassess where they're at. Like, there's no question John Horan was clear in where the GAA are at last night, and I think he deserves credit for that. But I think you can probably dig down into the GAA stance as a whole. And like, does a local GAA club have the capabilities of maintaining social distancing in the stands? From what John Horan was saying yesterday, perhaps not every GAA club would have that ability, or perhaps there wouldn't be the trust in the GAA clubs to be able to pull that sort of thing off. Maybe he's right, but maybe you also look at what local businesses are doing all around the country in terms of maintaining social distancing where possible when it comes to queues into their shops or whatever it may be. Are those same abilities, do those same abilities exist within GAA clubs? I would have thought so.
Yeah, I mean, you could just not have any spectators, and the point about these games is that they're opportunities for the clubs to get back up and begin that process of normalisation, as opposed to, there's not going to be one day where social distancing is stopped and then the next day there's, 80,000 people in a stadium like Croke Park. We're looking at a much reduced crowd at the start in any events in all facets of life. So, look, it does seem like they're buying a little bit of time here and seeing what other sports do. And again, obviously, there are a couple of professional sports on the island that they can look at, see what happens with the League of Ireland, see what happens with rugby, and follow the best guidelines that emerge from them. Or indeed, if no guidelines do emerge, then they realise that they've done the right thing, kicking the whole thing, kicking that can down the road. The other aspect of this, I suppose, is that if you allow small groups to come back in dribs and drabs, they were concerned, I think, about what would happen if one team goes rogue, the video gets shared on WhatsApp, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big story, an outbreak happens in a club, and who is ultimately responsible for that? Again, I suppose this is what the responsibility level that we want matches, everybody wants matches, but actually if you're an organisation, then you need to worry about, well, what are the ramifications, what is the risk assessment here, and what would our insurers say about the fact that we said you could go back in 3s and 4s, that was unpoliceable at some level, or not really that unpoliceable, but somebody broke guidelines and an outbreak happened, a cluster happened, and all of a sudden we're getting the blame for it. And who does the blame ultimately land with? And it lands with the people who made the decision to allow everybody to go back. Now, I don't know if it does, actually. I think at some level, you need personal responsibility. So if the whatever off-the-ball Gaels decide to go back and have a collective training session, then everybody at that training session is responsible for that, as opposed to the central organisation. But maybe from an insurance perspective, they thought that risk was too great.
Yeah, like I'm not sure was insurance mentioned last night as a specific reason for that, but like Horan definitely mentioned that once you give a little bit of rope, there is going to be a greater bit of leeway taken, and if you're allowing 4 people to go back, say for small socially distanced training, would clubs take advantage of that? And as you mentioned, the whole idea of something going viral on social media. Personally, I think that reflects poorly on the club rather than the organisation. Like nobody has been looking at Tottenham Hotspur players in a park in London and pointing the finger at the Premier League. After that, you're kind of pointing the finger at Tottenham Hotspur and Tottenham Hotspur only, and the players involved. And
the players, really? Like even Spurs, I didn't blame.
But if you want to do a ranking of who's actually responsible, certainly the Premier League would be less responsible than Tottenham Hotspur. But anyway, they're adults. They're actual grown men who can make this decision, who can read, who know the responsibility, who know the implications of this. And maybe there could be a little bit more trust placed in the clubs. But again, you're getting, like the motive of the GAA here is very clearly the welfare of the players and the families of the players. And if they feel that this is the best way for them to protect that, then absolutely fair enough. You just have to have questions about what might happen or how could there potentially be avenues for the GAA to change their mind, because that for me is one of the key points. And one of the important points that John Horan made last night was that they can move these dates. They can move them forward, they can move them back.
And we'll talk with Sam McConkey about how that might happen at around about 8:30 this morning. Sheahan is with us to bring us through the rest of today's sports news. Shane, good morning to you. How you doing?
Not too bad, lads. Keeping well, and yourselves?
All good. What's going on?
Not a whole pile. Nice sunny morning in Monaghan again here. I haven't been in Dublin since the whole thing really kicked in, so it's kind of been a bit weird normally living in Dublin and being home. It feels like an extended Christmas where the weather is really nice.
Do you feel like a teenager again as a matter of interest? Or like, you know, that first year where you go away to college and you come back and you're like...
Yeah, I'm getting dinners made for me every day, which is... you know, a nice treat. Normally you're spending all this money on food up in Dublin, so it's kind of nice in some ways. I had a new car bought recently as well, and I haven't been able to drive it. So it's sitting there picking up dirt in the front garden as well. So there's pros and cons. But I haven't done anything.
I had a new car bought as an interesting tense there. It was this a prize?
No. It was my old one was a 2002 Peugeot that very much reached the end of its existence. So it was forced upon me. But it had to be done. Listen, it's not all bad. I haven't done anything mental with my hair just yet in quarantine. So, you know, there's light at the end of the horizon. Although I'm getting close to it, I'd say I'll probably put a bit of colour into the hair in the next week or two.
What colour?
I was thinking pink or purple, something mental. Which would be very extravagant by modern standards.
There's literally no point in that. It's just like you need to do something that might be completely life changing. Go brown, like. Or go silver. Go like what's his name from Mad Men? Like do something that you can actually go, this is what it's going to look like. Or I might, you know, this pink and purple. I'm not having it.
It's too mental. You see,
it's just a waste. It's a waste of an opportunity. It's a wasted opportunity. Yeah. This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity for you to be somebody different for a few days, as opposed to I dyed my hair pink because it was like shave or dye essentially, which you can get away with anytime you want. Under the cover of charity, you can do that anytime you want. But right now, what you could do is like, what would I look like as a brunette?
Yeah, you see, the shave thing, I wouldn't risk it. I haven't been blessed with the world's greatest hairline, and it doesn't run in my family. So I feel like if I shaved it off,
it's not coming back.
It's not coming back. It's too big a risk to take. Whereas the dye thing is, you know, slightly less a risk.
Or you could go red. See what it's like to be like a proper full-blown redhead as opposed to the strawberry blonde. Anyway, look, there has been a multitude of sports news over the last 24 hours, and people are shouting at their Alexas in the corner going, get the hell on with it. So let's get on with it.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned it already, Ger, but the GAA is where we'll start. So John Horan saying he can't see any games being played again this year while social distancing measures are in place. The GAA president also said the association is looking at losses of 50 million quid if the 2020 Intercounty season is wiped out by that COVID-19 pandemic. He was saying yesterday as well on the Sunday game, facilities will remain closed until the 20th of July at the earliest. And he's still against the idea of playing games behind closed doors. He also said the GAA will be prepared to use the first 2 months of next year to finish a 2020 Intercounty Championship if it doesn't go ahead in October or November. He was kind of, as you mentioned as well, a bit reluctant to talk about the idea of finishing the Allianz Leagues, which is an interesting one. I know Monaghan Kerry was the next one up, Eoin, and you were due another visit up to Inniskeen, so we may not get that day out after all, unfortunately.
God, that is the truly devastating part of this. Like, you could not maintain social distancing in McNeil's pub though, and for that reason, I'm out and rescheduling this until pubs are back open.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. You've also mentioned the Premier League as well. Plans to resume the season at neutral venues to be discussed further today. Some teams, including Brighton, Watford and Aston Villa, have voiced their concerns at those proposals. When players can return to training in groups, and contract extensions will also be part of those talks. Brighton confirmed yesterday a third player at the club had tested positive for coronavirus. This adds a bit of more confusion to the mix. 2 others contracted COVID-19 earlier on in the pandemic. It is believed they have recovered, but this latest diagnosis will prove further blow to the Premier League's plans to return as well. UEFA will hold more talks today about proposals to reschedule leagues once countries have passed peaks in their pandemics. And they've issued a strong recommendation that domestic campaigns should indeed be finished. France and the Netherlands have already decided to end their seasons because of restrictions put in place by their governments. The Bundesliga, of course, as we've already heard in the last week or so, are due to restart on Saturday, the 16th of May. However, Dynamo Dresden, who play in the second tier of German football, they're currently bottom of that division, have put their entire squad and coaching staff into 2 weeks of isolation after 2 players tested positive over the weekend. They have said they're unable to fulfil their fixtures, so that adds a bit of confusion to the issue in Germany as well. Meanwhile, UEFA is considering plans to shorten the qualification competitions for next season's Champions League and Europa League, or in a worst case scenario, scrap them altogether. The start of next year's Champions League has already been pushed back to October 20th due to this coronavirus, but there remains uncertainty over whether the qualifying competitions can be scheduled in time. So the current plans are, of course, to complete the season's tournaments by the end of August. That looks quite unlikely as things stand. Some news up in Scotland as well. Inverness say it's bemusing to hear the SPFL claim they have no evidence of bullying during the process which ended leagues below the Premiership early. The Championship Club insists they reported an allegation last month against a Scottish Professional Football League board member. A proposal from Rangers to carry out an independent investigation into the vote will be discussed at a general meeting that will take place tomorrow. So dicey times up in Scotland. Meanwhile, a decision is expected to be made on whether the Dublin Marathon is to be held this week. This story is in the back pages this morning. A key meeting of race organisers is scheduled for Thursday. The 41st running of the event is set for Sunday, October 25th. Is a 25,000 entry sellout. The organisers announcing the capacity back in January after announcing a new part lottery system. They received just over 35,000 applications at all. And can I just say, as someone who has ran the Dublin Marathon before, people should be delighted to have an extra year to train for this thing. The Dublin Marathon is not an easy race. I mean, granted, I didn't train for it properly. I was drinking 3 days before the race and didn't quite build up my miles as you're supposed to. But if anyone gets an extra year to train for a Dublin Marathon, count your blessings, because that's it's not an easy thing to run 26.2 miles or whatever it is in 4, 5, 3 hours, however long it is. So
when do we expect that announcement?
That's the meeting is supposed to take place on Thursday of this week, Ger. So hopefully we'll have an indication by Thursday evening, Friday morning on that. So I know there's a lot of people waiting for news on the Dublin Marathon, so you should have it by the end of this week. There is tennis news as well. French Open may have to be held without fans later this year, according to organisers. The tournament was due to be held between the 24th of May and 7th of June. That, of course, is not going to happen. It was pushed back to September. The tennis season was suspended in early March and won't restart until mid-July at the earliest. Wimbledon has already been cancelled, while the status of the US Open, which is scheduled for late August, remains unclear. There is racing returning behind closed doors in France today as well, lads. A 10-race card being held at Longchamp in Paris. Racing in France has been on hold since St. Patrick's Day. And we did have sport returning over the weekend, of course, you may have seen. The first major event in the US since March, behind closed doors, that was UFC 249. Justin Gaethje claimed victory in the main contest in Florida. The highlight of the weekend, Dana White fist bumping and shaking hands and hugging all the athletes. So interesting times, but yeah, it seems quite soon for UFC to be returning, given the very nature of the sport and how close the competitors are. But look, it's back. I should as well point you to the offtheball.com, and one of the articles we have this morning is Tommy Rooney's love-in for Sean Boylan. He says Sean Boylan's greatness carved into stone. So my argument is that Tommy's actually, he's not a full Meath man. He's kind of a hybrid Cavan, Monaghan, Meath man. He lives in Meath, of course. He could kick a football though into his into his Cavan neighbours from his garden, and he went to school in Monaghan. So, you know, he could potentially be putting forward an argument for any of those three counties. And look, Banty McEnany has to be in the conversation, surely, as former Meath manager. All
right, Shane, on that note, credibility shot. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. That's Sheahan. He was talking about Tommy, obviously, being a hybrid as opposed to Sean Boylan, who's 100% carved from Meath stock. And we're going to talk about that on the Meath Rushmore for Meath, which is up for discussion today. Here's what's coming up on the show. I'm going to speak with Professor Sam McConkey in just a little while to get some reaction to the GAA stance that there won't be any action until social distancing is gone, essentially, and what that implications of that are. That's coming your way in about 15 minutes' time. After that, we're going to speak with Ronan O'Gara. I've got a How's the Head for you this morning from somebody working on the front line. And Meath Rushmore is Meath. Hector hEochagáin is going to edit Tommy Rooney's selections. A lot of people coming in already with suggestions. Boylan, O'Rourke, Gordon Elliott, and then an absolute scrap for the last spot. Brendan says, have to push to get at least 2 horse racing faces on there, Hector. Very hard to decide, but I'd maybe go for Johnny Murtagh for flat and Tom Draper for jumps, as it's impossible to pick between the jumps jockeys. Yeah, a lot of opinion on that one. 087 9 180 180 is the number. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
And indeed, Tommy's love letter to Sean Boylan with a brilliant picture is the lead story on offtheball.com this morning. Meath's Meath Rushmore, Sean Boylan's greatness carved into stone. No suggestion yet as to who else Tommy is going to put up yet. It didn't kind of leak out, but I suspect it's going to be 4 footballers given Tommy's background, and then Hector will have to stick in one of his racing buddies. He would destroy me. Damien Delaney talked about Roy Keane's management. Apparently Roy Keane went harder on Damien Delaney than a lot of others because he was from Cork. Doesn't sound like the best form of management. People thought I was a Scrooge. Damien Delaney on Premier League wages, again talking about how he actually managed to look after his money properly and buy a house for his ma. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer likens Roy Keane to Michael Jordan. So we haven't talked about Michael Jordan yet. Have you seen the 2 episodes? Have you stayed up?
No, I'll be watching it. I'll be watching it legally this morning, sure.
They only break in this part of the world this morning, do they? Yeah,
exactly. I wouldn't dare try and put my head above the parapet and try and seek something out that I shouldn't be. I think people have. I think there's been plenty of leaks weeks ahead. I think if you wanted to get to the end of this, you possibly could find a way online of getting to it. But no, I haven't seen it this week. So we'll be recording that this afternoon for tomorrow morning. That's off the bull, of course.
Yeah, looking forward to that. It's been great stuff so far. Kieran Donaghy, Jarlath Regan, Ronan Mullen and Eoin bringing you immediate reaction and analysis of what's been happening in the last dance. So first paper for us this morning.
The Irish Independent leads with a picture of a youngster, Tyg Savage is his name, age 3, pucking a slitter outside Walsh Park, which was yesterday due to host the Munster Senior Hurling Championship opener between Waterford and Tipperary. Eamon Sweeney then, the summer that might have been, rather. He's writing about all the games that possibly could have taken place that we won't see now this summer. And then the main story, Horan says GAA can't return while social distancing stays in place. President insists members won't be asked to police guidelines as association faces €50 million loss. And this is kind of the other thing that came from last night, Ger, is the fact that John Horan has kind of put a figure on that, the whole €50 million loss of the association. And it just kind of struck me as well over the course of the weekend, like the financial impact and the added burden that this was put on people when they actually want to come back to giving their money to the GAA. Because, like, I guess it's a little over 12 months at this point, we were having debates around GAA ticket prices and them being hiked up at the start of 2019. And there was a lot of division over that, about the idea of whether or not to actually bring them up. But there was a justification on that. The GAA figured that the economy was in rude health and that people could perhaps afford to give an extra tenner or whatever it was for a championship match ticket and give money back to the communities in that way. I would just have serious concerns about whether or not the people will automatically return through the turnstiles once things get back up and running and things return to normal. Because on top of all of this, you've got people, I would imagine, and households in particular, who now realise how perhaps some of their expenditure had been outrageous during this whole boom is back phase. Now that the pubs are closed, now that sporting events aren't running, I'd imagine that there are people looking at themselves thinking, how was I spending so much money in certain cases? And like, I wonder, it's perhaps a conversation for another day and a conversation for another show, but perhaps that is another thing that sport might have to deal with down the line, the economical impact, not just of the recession that's coming down the lines, but perhaps of a rethink in personal spending.
Well, they go hand in hand. Obviously, consumer sentiment is going to be very, very weak. And when that happens, spending contracts, and that kind of makes recessions worse, and that's what we're looking at. So next for me is the Irish Examiner. There's been a lot of long-form pieces coming from Anthony Daly over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks, and they've all been great. This one is about Cork this week. We look at Cork differently now. They're no longer the feared machine they once were. Obviously, his rivalry with Cork goes back a long time. Famously, they were looking over at Donlogue. It was in '99 when Donlogue and that bunch of kids came through and won All Ireland for Cork, and he was the one going, we're Cork. And James O'Connor and the rest of the Clare lads were kind of looking over and going, what's going on? Who are these guys? And then obviously they were All Ireland champions very soon after that. So and also the Cork GAA mourns the passing of John T. O'Leary, who was synonymous with the sombrero, and a bunch of bandmates as well who would have travelled the country in Cork gear that I think everybody would have been familiar with at various stages over the last while as well. And then obviously they've gone, Horan admits 50 million hit to GAA, fears 50 million hit to GAA, and admits return of games unlikely is the story there. We'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of minutes.
Photograph on the back of the London Times of horse racing returning to Longchamp today. The main story, Brighton test adds to fears over restart. Club confirms that third player has coronavirus, and kind of similar to how it's been in Germany. You've got a situation where there is a return to play on the horizon, but there is also multiple positive tests coming on stream as well. Things have been shut down for Dynamo Dresden for the next 2 weeks, obviously. Whether or not that'll obviously be the case for Brighton, but they don't have, if they were back in collective training, obviously the severity of that would have been graver. And also if there had actually been fixtures coming up, say, this weekend. So interesting to see if that actually tempers what the Premier League want to do. They're meeting via video conference today. It seems like we've had countless D-Day showdown talks, whatever way you want to build this up. Today is the latest in these talks between the 20 clubs.
Front page of the Irish Times sports section this morning is association facing 50 million loss. Horan. Now, it's a loss of revenue as opposed to a loss. So they're not spending 50 million and then going 50 million to the red. It's a loss of revenue that they would have had. Just the language isn't the language of economics, or accounting rather. Just to clarify that point as well. Malachy Clerkin is about Kyle Walker, who for the second time has broken lockdown restrictions and wrote an impassioned plea about privacy for his family. Apparently paparazzi were camped outside his sister's place, which I think Kyle Walker can be an asshole for breaching lockdown and can also have his privacy respected. So these two things are not mutually exclusive. The newspapers who were camped outside his sister's house are also assholes, and that needs to be recognised at the same time as the fact that Kyle Walker's an asshole for breaking lockdown. Remember, obviously Kyle Walker had already broken lockdown previously and had been rapped on the knuckles for his night of passion, as it was. This was visiting family members. So anyway, Dublin Marathon set to decide its fate, and then there's that picture which seems, you know, that footage that they have of old matches where the crowd and the terrace surge forward whenever there's a goal, or they surge back depending on, and you look at it and you go, wow, look how weird that footage looks, because there's no safe standing. There's, you know, it's pre-Hillsborough, it's pre the Taylor report, and it looks wild. And it's the same crowd scenes that you would see from big matches in Ireland in the 50s and 60s, either in Talca Park or Dalymount, or indeed sometimes in Croker as well, if the match was big enough to have a sellout. And now you look at pictures of people running in a marathon and you go, wow, that looks so wild, except this isn't black and white footage. This is a picture from last year's marathon, and it's so difficult to see us ever looking at this again, standing at the side of the road and cheering 35,000 or 29,000 or whatever the figure is, people huddled together for a number of kilometres. It's so difficult for us to imagine getting back to that situation and thinking, yeah, let's do this. Unless, of course, you're also American, in which case, you know, you're going to be doing this next weekend.
You're also retrospectively looking at old footage, and it's not even sports events. Like I was watching Curb Your Enthusiasm yesterday, and Larry David shakes somebody's hand, and like I kind of get a giggle out of it. I'm like, that's hilarious. He's obviously trying to play up the whole character that he's not a particularly nice person. Then I realized, hold on a minute, what are you doing? This is not coronavirus television, but like it will not come back for a long time. The good old firm handshake will no longer be a way of judging somebody's character as a first impression anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's like definitely winners and losers when it comes to that. 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us this morning. Remember, Meath Rushmore coming your way just after 9:15 this morning. Hector hEochagáin will be editing Tommy Rooney's selection. If you've got, it's about Meath. If you've got any opinions on that, Ronan O'Gara coming your way at 8:45, and Sam McConkey coming your way in 2 minutes. Eoin, what's next?
The Irish Mirror leads with Horrible, with HOR in red. Regarding John Horan's surname, I'd assume. John warns of €50 million hole in GAA coffers as he accepts championship, looks dead. Chelsea eye Rice to replace Real target Kante. Meanwhile, so Real Madrid are interested in signing N'Golo Kante. If he leaves Chelsea, they want to bring in Declan Rice. You've got the story there of a third Brighton player testing positive for coronavirus, and Premier League footballers have been told that the pitch will be safer than the supermarket.
I don't normally do this, but the front of the Irish Sun this morning, it's a sports story. Not really. Dickie, I'll box Johnny Logan's head off. Ace 82 hits back after Eurovision star slams him. I mean, I'm sure you were all about the Chrissy Teigen and whoever she was having a row with at the weekend. Or maybe it was the Neil Gaiman and his wife, if they're still married, story that was getting your gossip going. But actually, the big beef of the weekend was Johnny Logan and Dickie Rock. Did you see this, Eoin?
I didn't see any of these beefs, actually. God, I really need to get a life, actually, and start investing some more time in this.
Johnny Logan said about Dickie Rock, he's a legend in his own head and living in a fantasy world. And then now Dickie Rock has come back out, and Dickie Rock's in good shape. That body, I'm telling you, if that's how Dickie Rock is, you know, whatever it is, whatever his exercise regime is, it's working out. Back page of the Irish Sun this morning is no vaccine, no crowds. Boris government's plan is huge blow to sport. Clubs facing extinction if fans kept out.
If Dickie Rock ends up punching Johnny Logan, we could call him Decky Rock. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail this morning is it's game over. GAA President Horan admits play may not return in 2020 and claims a dirty tricks campaign by Premier League clubs is an exclusive here in the Irish Daily Mail, saying the Premier League clubs could use contracts and things like that as manipulation to ensure that players actually do take to the pitch. And then the main photo there of Kyle Walker, COVID Wally Walker, emails fans to say sorry.
And the star from me, very quickly, game over. That's a brilliant picture of dandelions sprouting on the Avantcard Park Sean McDermott pitch yesterday, where Leitrim were scheduled to meet Mayo in the Connacht quarter-final. The first round of games, the 2020 Championship in Ireland, were due to take place the weekend, but all fixtures obviously postponed. Game over, question mark. Horan can't see any Gaelic games being played while social distancing is in place. That's the Star and the Telegraph next for you. Let's hold that one up for you. Johnson boost for June 12th kickoff is a quite positive spin from the Telegraph this morning, which is different from a lot of the other papers. And bold plan to turn new US League into IPL of rugby. A group of American investors is promising to revolutionise rugby by recruiting the world's biggest names to a new league in the United States. The National Rugby Football League, which has ties to the NFL, is set to be launched in 2022 with a salary cap equivalent to Premiership Rugby's $7 million limit. Our ambition is to be the biggest league in the world, said Michael Clements, their new commissioner, has told the Daily Telegraph. So it'll be interesting to see how that fits in with the existing league in America, and you can be sure that there will be legal challenges aplenty for that.
The back page of The Guardian this morning, there was something magical in the air. Pride, belief and despair in the summer. Football came home. It is, of course, Euro 96. Brighton reveal restart doubts as third player tests positive. Meanwhile, and in the main headline there, week of chaos. Premier League no closer to green light as crunch talks begin. It feels like crunch talks have been happening for quite some time. A couple of other stories then on the back of The Guardian. On the edge, rugby league clubs fear for future as cost of crisis mounts. And the big one, talking TikTok. Nathan Redmond on lip-syncing lockdown and starting over.
The Herald is Gilroy's timely warning This is 6 days that shaped decade of the Dubs, and this is the National Football League final when Cork beat them 21 points to 214 in 2011. And when we have the All-Ireland someday, that's when we'll stop hearing that. Pat Gilroy spoke in defence of his embattled Dubs in the Red Raw aftermath of the 2011 Allianz League final. The media auditorium took a deep collective breath. What did he say that was so amazing? The question asking if there was a mental block that Dublin needed to get over. Do you think I'm going to say yes to that now, in fairness? If I really believe that, I should walk out the door here and never be in front of that team again. This team have character and guts to put up with the kind of stuff that surrounds them every day, and they get back out there and they train and they work. And I tell you, they're the most honest guys and they'll get stick for this. We had an 8-point lead and we lost. I've forgotten that, actually. I've forgotten that Cork came back from 8 points to beat them in the 2011 league final. And everybody thought that this Dub team were inveterate chokers and they were never going to do anything.
Yeah, that was an interest, because I think Dublin were favourites going into that league final, weren't they? Despite the fact that Cork, and then I think the tables turned a little bit that summer then, where everybody expected Cork to win the All-Ireland. So, yeah, God, it seems like there was a number of actual big moments for that Dublin team in the league over those couple of years where they really used the early part of the year to actually create that grit that would be required to win an All-Ireland. I'm going to finish up on the Irish news here, Ger. Horan not open to closed doors is the main headline in their sports section. And be careful what you wish for. Owen Mulligan has sent out a warning for Tyrone fans who want rid of Mickey Hart.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay. That's the end of our newspapers there this morning for you. There is an opportunity here for us to look back in history and look at some of those key games. And I think that's an interesting thing that the Herald have done. Like the Dublin team, I was just looking at it there. Not a bad team, right? Cluxon, Fitzsimons, Brogan, McMahon, Barry Cahill, Ger Brennan, Kevin Nolan, Bastick, Mark Kildare, McCauley, Brian Cullen, Kevin McManaman, Paul Flynn, Bernard Brogan, Dermot Connolly and Mossy Quinn.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. But that's the 2011 league final, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a sensational team, actually, isn't it? It's like, it is the seeds of a truly great team about to come through there. Like the best of the Alan Brogan wasn't playing there, was he?
No, he might have been.
No, you're missing one of their better players as well at that point. So like there's actual depth there as well. It's quality. Like obviously it gets better in a few years' time, and the influx of the under-21s into 2013, and then the random nature of Brian Fenton popping up in the middle of the decade takes it to the next level. But perhaps we actually just don't give enough respect to the players that actually came through from the doldrums to climb the mountain in 2011, just in terms of how difficult that was and the exceptional group of players that they actually had to have at their disposal for that to become a reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's so quick from that turnaround from a league final. I guess I don't know. Do you think that maybe they had a heavy training session during the week or something weird happened? To go from there to winning the All-Ireland?
Every possibility, but like, I mean, does the collapse in the league final not suggest as much to do with a mental lapse as anything else? Like, I would need to watch this game back. I can't remember the details of that second half, but it could easily have been a situation where Cork get a goal or they get a string of points early in the second half.
21 points Cork scored over the course of the game, but no goals.
Right, okay, so that rules that possibility out. But the slight inkling of a comeback, I would imagine, at that point would probably have put Dublin on the ropes. They were a different psychological beast at that time. They weren't a psychological beast, it seemed, quite often. And like, I don't know, they seem to be haunted by quite a lot of things. And there was a couple of big semi-final moments that didn't go their way in the previous decade. So perhaps that's part of it. Maybe it just comes down to the fact that they were wrecked and they'd gone too hard at it the week before leading into a league final.
The start of Learwigs 09 or 2010? 09.
09.
So 09 to start Learwigs. 2010 they lose the All-Ireland semi-final to Cork. And then Cork beat them in the league final the following year. And then they win the All-Ireland.
Yeah. That's the trend. 2010 probably goes down as the opportunity, really, doesn't. if they hadn't won 2011, and like obviously there is no missed opportunity when you're a Dublin fan now, looking back on the 5 in a row and all that, you can't really have too many regrets about the turn of the decade. But if they hadn't won 2011, they might even have looked back at 2010 as the one that was there for the taking, given how much of a complete demolition derby the weekend of the All-Ireland quarter-finals was that year, when all the winners of the provinces got taken out over the course of 3 days. And it just led to a situation where Cork could finally get in and win their All-Ireland. But Dubs fans, if they hadn't won 2011, would have looked back thinking to themselves, oh my God, that really was our opportunity.
Bernard Brogan goes off injured after 50 minutes. Alan Brogan was already injured, so maybe that was the type of stuff that would have an impact in terms of the team's fragile confidence. But there's like a bunch of superstars who end up winning 5 or 6, or in some cases 7 All-Ireland medals already in that team. So not a bad team. And I don't know, if you were Cork, you must have been thinking, this is pretty easy. We've just come from 8 points down against a mediocre Dublin side. We're the All-Ireland champions. What could possibly go wrong?
That's probably the last piece of psychology you want a Cork person to think, though, isn't it? You want them to keep you want them to think that they're not capable of beating Dublin quite easily. And I would say even around that time, you want Dublin not thinking that way as well. I'm not saying they weren't humble or anything like that. I think that there might be a bit of chest beating going on when it comes to the great teams of that time. In fairness, I don't think any team around then has anywhere near the level of humility that the 5 in a row Dublin team we've seen in recent years has. I think perhaps it was a different psychological game back then. But yeah, I think Cork definitely felt that at that point they were the best team in the country in 2011. Like they were All-Ireland champions, so like it's a fair way to think. But also having put in that performance in the second half against Dublin in the league final, like it just really, without having watched that game back, it just sounds like Cork had set themselves up for back-to-back. This was going to be another historic summer for Cork football.
All right, 0879 180 180 if you want to get in touch with us this morning. That's our WhatsApp number. You can always use the hashtag OTB AM, or you can get us on Twitter as well. Now, former Munster player James Coughlan joined Neil Tracy on Sunday's OTB for a feature-length interview you'll find on our YouTube channel or in the OTB podcast network. Just search OTB Rugby and you'll get it there. Here he is talking about facing the All Blacks with Munster.
They're brilliant. They're great. They're great souvenirs. I remember going into the change room afterwards, because as you say, I was captain for the match in Australia, and we went into the game into the change room, and I was chatting with Berwick Barnes afterwards, and I was just sitting down, and I remember looking over, and there was one of the young fellas from Darwin who'd never seen rain in his life like he had seen. He was wrapped up, I'm not joking, wrapped up in the hypothermia blanket. He had never experienced colder like it in his life. And we were inside, and I was like, it's windy, but it's not that bad, you know. It wasn't as bad as going to Galway and the sports ground on New Year's Eve, you know, when you've the sand from the pit, from the dogs coming in on top of you. So you were all sandburnt on your arms. It was freezing cold. It was lashing rain. And we were like, it's cold, but it's not, you know what I mean? It's not nice, but it's not the worst that we've ever played in. Yeah, and like the All Blacks match was just, just something special. I mean, I think it was Raj. I even remember Raj coming in. He said, like, this is probably the best event I've ever been to in my life. Like, between the helicopters coming down, the Jew hackers, the whole, like, the rugby was nearly here and there. You know what I mean? It was just one of those nights that was just amazing. The crowd was mental, the haka, and then you're just trying to come back, and we were like, I remember we played UL Bows on the Tuesday before that match, and they beat us with the team that was starting. Pretty much, yeah, and they beat us, or there was only a point or two between us or something like that. And we were like, all absolutely shitting a brick that if Bows are going to beat us, what hope have we against the All Blacks? You know what I mean? And it wasn't the Mickey Mouse All Blacks team. Like Kieran Reid was playing. I swapped jerseys with Adam Thompson was playing with good 50 caps. Jose Guerra was on the wing. I'm just trying to go over. Liam Messon was playing.
Joe Rakatoko scored the winning try.
Thanks for that. Yeah. 78 minutes. Yeah. So no, but like they're special nights. I mean, yeah, it's just they're lovely. It's something lovely to be able to show like my son was looking at the old matches on YouTube there last week. I was like, "Oh, throw on one of the matches there for the laugh to see," and they're brilliant. You know, like days like Toulouse and Thomond Park. You know, and they're just our Harlequins away, and you know they're just lovely. It's nice to be able to look back on them and pity we didn't get to lift more trophies because we were just at the pox of the semi-final. I don't know how many semi-finals I lost, but there was way too many semi-finals. But and it's we were good enough. But then when you watch back the actual matches, like I watched the Toulon game with Finn last week, and we just threw it away. When you watch it back, like we literally gave them the match. But yes, look, they are what they are. They're brilliant, but they're a long time behind me now, unfortunately.
That full interview with James Cullen available wherever you get your podcasts. The best place is the Go Loud app or indeed offtheball.com/podcast. We've got Ronan O'Gara with us. Ronan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Hey, Ger. I'm great. And yourself?
I'm good, thanks. We had James Cullen there talking about that game against the All Blacks. He said that you said it was one of the best events you'd ever been at. Why did you guys not play in that game? What was the story with that?
Because we were playing, Ireland were playing on the Saturday, if I recollect correctly, or is that?
Yeah, no, that like. It
wasn't a trick question, was it, Jerry?
No. It's just like, is there a conversation?
No, we were in camp on that Tuesday, wasn't it? I think we were in camp on Tuesday. Was that a Tuesday or Wednesday night kickoff, the All Blacks game?
I'll tell you exactly now. They said it was Wednesday when they were chatting there.
Yeah.
So.
It would have been, I think, and it didn't. Ireland played the New Zealand the following Saturday.
So you can't play twice in a week. That was very straightforward. The frontline players aren't going to play.
The way I played, it would have been better to play on the Wednesday night in Thomond Park, because I think it was a little bit of a warning sign for New Zealand, and the fact, I think this is what an emotional Irish performance can do, but unfortunately we were well off when we played in Green the following weekend. But that game in Thomond Park, I suppose, when you're a player too, it's different when you know you're finished. But when you're going to the ground as a player, I remember it really well. We parked in my Ross behind the ground, and just to walk to the ground. And very funny story. It was it was my first time in the heart of my Ross, and Earlsy was obviously with me. I think we parked the car, myself, Dave Wallace and Keith Earls, in probably Earlsy's folks' house. And we were kind of walking to the ground, and Earlsy was kind of there, just keep her head down and keep going. And it was fine. But then we met one or two of the younger boys there, and one or two recognised me, and they kind of go, geez, one of the best kickers in the world is in my Ross tonight, and they told their friends, and it was just like, it was brilliant just to see the joy of it, and they just couldn't believe that this guy who was a kicker of a rugby ball was in their park tonight. You know, it was brilliant. And then you just got chatting to them, and just how nice the young kids were. And then they were kind of said, come on, bring us to the game. But sure, we couldn't bring them into the game. We didn't have tickets for them, but they just didn't understand it. But it was a great moment. And I think that probably was just set the tone in terms of, I think people didn't know what to expect, really. And obviously with the history of Munster and the All Blacks, but you could hear in Irish camp the vibes coming out of the Munster camp that something special was going to happen. Something special happened obviously before the game, but something special, as we know from hindsight, happened on the pitch as well. And I think it was anyone who knows Rua Tapoki and his Maori values, and Dougie and what he stands for. And I think we had Jeremy Manny and we had Lafemi Mafi, so there's kind of elder statesmen and junior statesmen. So it was they really had the rest of the Munster team kind of on tune with the culture and the tradition of what happens to receiving New Zealand teams. So it was just watching it from the stand. I just think it was probably a little bit, I wouldn't say subdued, but the moment the haka, I suppose, the Munster New Zealand boys did the haka, it just, I think, took any sporting event I was at to a whole new level, because you were kind of saying, it's not going to really work with 4, is it? But it did work, and it worked incredibly well. And then it was game on, as George Henning would say, game on. You know. So it was a fantastic spectacle, I suppose, just to kind of go to see it. But you were kind of, as a player, you were measuring up, and you just were like, oh God, I just wish I was out there, because it's your club, Munster, and it's so special. But it was so good for guys that didn't have the biggest day on European Cup finals. This was what you'd like to think that they hang around for, and they don't go to other provinces for.
We don't know Rua. Like, he didn't really do that many sit-down media interviews. So what? Like, you obviously really liked him, and I'm fairly sure you named one of your kids after him. Is that right?
Yeah, I would be. I like the name, and I suppose I like the man behind him too, and what he stood for. And he was, maybe at the stage of the career I was, as a man, I really, really respected him and liked him, and he made the game very, very easy for me. I think you've heard this 100 times from me, Gerard. Maybe some of the listeners haven't, but like, in terms of playing the game at that stage, I had Dougie Howell on my right wing, so on my right hand side, and I'd have obviously my 12, which was Tapoki, on my left hand side, and obviously one of the good things I would like to think was probably I was able to see things. But when you have kind of 3 guys seeing the same things and being able to communicate on the run, it was just so enjoyable to play. I can particularly remember one of the early games, was it in the Ricoh Arena, where we played Wasps, and I don't think we'd probably had many games together, but we just really hit it off as a combination. And then if Rua said jump, Lafimi would say how high. Literally, it was like big brother, small brother, and the two of them were a brilliant combination together. And then Dougie was in charge of everything on the right hand side, which a lot of people probably wouldn't think of rugby like that. Rugby league would be more familiar with that, about left and right side attacks, but in rugby union you have it really as well, but we don't really use that language.
Right. And as a man, what was it that stood out? Because again, I know nothing about him, or kind of.
I suppose the fact that there's a great feeling on the pitch that someone has your back and will do whatever. I think I'm potentially had to earn that as well, you know. But when you earn that respect, you have to kind of talk yourself up, which isn't great. But I can remember we went to Claremont and we got a bonus point out of it, a losing bonus point, but maybe set us up for that campaign where I got split, and I actually ended up getting 28 stitches in my right ear after the game. But kind of it was a complete accident. One of the flankers jumped over the rock and he landed on my ear, and my ear just kind of exploded and it was flopping down. So I obviously had to go. But so Rua presumed that's me done for the day. And then he kind of says, he just broke out laughing. He goes, "What are you coming back on for?" And it was normal, you know, at that stage with adrenaline and stuff, you just kind of, whatever it takes. I don't know, would it be passed medically nowadays or anything like that, but there was different rules at that time, and you come on with a head bandage. But it was, I think he probably associated me with a little bit of a pretty boy, and hopefully not that tough, but I think that's when our relationship really crystallised, and I ended up getting a penalty late in the game. So it was moments like that I think that people never hear about, that are very, very important, because I was down in New Zealand for obviously 2 seasons, and I met him regularly, and it's like I've never been apart from, which I think is testament to to a relationship, but that was created in a really good environment in Munster. If you ask all the other boys, he'd be very, very popular too.
Yeah, it's a great humble brag. He thought of me as a pretty boy. He just slipped that one in there, and the rest of us are like, oh, okay, right. That's I like what you did there, Ronan.
No. But in terms of, I suppose it was, you know what I mean. There was obviously. I put my body on the line at times. Tackle technique can be questioned, but you don't run out the gate, especially not in Claremont when there's 16,000 baying for you, and you just can't roll over. But they're coming at you, and you just got to stand there and do the best you can. But that was they were great days.
Ronan, could I just ask about those very early days actually with Munster, because it just something that stuck out to me when you were talking about walking through my Ross before that game at Keith Earls. Was there ever a sense at the start of your Munster career about being a lad from Cork and the reception you got in Limerick, or perhaps even the Limerick lads during the games in Cork? Was there ever a getting to know period when it came to the fans that you almost had to build up an appreciation on their end of things for the Cork lad representing what I'd imagine a lot of Limerick people would imagine was a Limerick team?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it is. And I think it's the most important thing to me too is I think the Limerick people took me as one of their own, and that doesn't happen very often. And that's the truth. But I think hopefully on European Cup nights in Thomond Park, I earned that right, I think, through performances on the pitch, because for me, the Limerick, Joe Soap has their finger on the pulse big time, and the finger on the pulse big time in terms of how they analyse and how they, I think, judge the rugby players. So I had to earn that, and I was, you know what I mean, a fancy Dan from Cork on going up to play there. And you know what I mean, there's the infamous story of getting chased out of Tom Clifford Park by young Munster. I ran away from Desi Classy after I stamped on the other prop's head in a game, which was, I don't know what happened, but wow,
hang on a second.
To do.
How famous is that we don't know it? Just to give us the pot of history.
It's very famous in Munster rugby circles. I got chased around the pitch by Des Classy, and all the Thomond Park, or all young Munster, 10,000 people were there. Open the gate, O'Gara's coming. Because I just there was no way I was standing up to him you know what I mean, he was going to box the head off me. So I said to Desi, because I became very friendly with him in Munster camps, and still to this day over the years, I said, did you think I was going to stand there toe to toe with you? I said, no, I was going to use my evasive skills and just try and get away from you. But there was definitely, I suppose, periods where Cork players would have been judged a little bit harsher on, coming back to your question. But I think in my case, I think competing with Killian Keane and Barry Everett before that, but Killian Keane I think was very good for me in the fact that he was from Dublin, or he's from Dublin, but he was playing with Gary Owen and residing in Limerick. When he made the transition, I suppose, easy for me, and things like what he says in the local paper it's important too, I think, for young guys to kind of go, well, I'm here to help the squad. It's not like, oh, well, he's got a lot of weaknesses in his game and this is, you know, this should be my position. He was completely the opposite. He was very supportive and very, I suppose, understanding of the situation, that hopefully I'd have a longer time in an Irish jersey than he would. But I think it was a big challenge, and it's a thing now that I'm finished that was very important to me, that you know, you got to earn the respect the hard way and the right way, and that for me was very, very important, because obviously I'm very proud of being from Cork, but playing for Munster, it's very important that you know what I mean, that you're respected on Limerick territory. You got to earn that respect. That was key.
So would someone like Paul O'Connell have had an easier ride early doors wearing the red of Munster?
No, I don't think so. I think Paul was very much easy to pick out from the pack at a very young age. But then other people kind of, when they came down to Cork, a lot of them enjoy playing in Musgrave Park and the change up there. But like, for me, the place, you know, I mean, European nights in January and December, it's Thomond Park, and it's a very, very, very special ground that I wouldn't ever like to dilute.
One of the things that we're all very interested in what's going to happen next is kind of the state of the game, and we've got a new weekly feature with Keith Woods, State of the Union, where we're talking to people around the world to see exactly what they think is going to happen next, and everything, it seems, is on the table at the moment, because we don't know when international rugby is going to be possible again. We don't know if tours are going to happen the way they used to happen. It's going to be interesting to see if fans are allowed into stadiums at some point in the next 18 months. Who knows what the lie of the land is going to be. So there is an opportunity for rugby to hit the reset button if they wanted to, and what that might look like.
Yeah. And we probably would need minimum 3 hours to even kind of scratch the surface. But as you said, Jared, now is the only time, because once we get back to playing and playing with people in the ground, it's too late because the machine is rolling. There's, as you said, there's a pause now. So this is the greatest time for growing the game, or restructuring the game, or doing whatever is possible to make the game better and more attractive to especially gather, I suppose, or try and choose a new market of people to get watching rugby. It has to grow, because finances have all of a sudden become important, but also it is a time for asking the hard questions. But to do that, who's around the table doing this, or what strategic groups have they organised, or is it just country by country battling away? And for me, that doesn't seem to be the best policy to get stuff done.
It definitely feels like the sport needs to decide what the shared vision of the future looks like. And for me, I kind of feel like the player's voice needs to be elevated a little bit in this. Like there should be a rough number of games that you would expect a front line player, a top tier elite player to play every year. If you look at the NFL, for example, they play 16 regular season games. Next season it's going to be 17, and they play 2 or 3 preseason, and then you keep going week by week as long as you last. And everybody knows that's the absolute maximum number of games that you're going to be allowed to play. Like, what is the number of games that a rugby player should play, and then work back from that?
Well, exactly. But I think even before that, it's kind of, you've got to ask the question, who owns the players? So in Ireland, the federation or the union own the players, but in France, the club owns the players. So already you have an instant loggerhead situation where the French federation don't control their players. They control it in windows, but I think the Premiership and the top 14, if I'm correct, the English players are contracted to their clubs, and then some of them have special deals with the RFU. But in France, players are contracted to their club. The wages of the French national team are paid by the clubs, and they're obviously increased in performance bonuses when they do represent France. But it's a very different model in terms of, I suppose, what we're used to in Ireland. And you can see already now, I think I was reading this morning that there's potential boycott of the European Cup because of, I think, how many French clubs are going to be in it. And the French and the English team seem to be very united in their vision. But if you were to play a top 14 season without barrage, that's without playoffs, you have 26 league games. You know, so there, like, as you say, there's an awful lot of digging through here to get what is actually the best formula for having an attractive calendar that suits everyone. I think also, you know, it doesn't make sense for me the fact that in June or after a European Cup final, a lot of Irish players go to the Southern Hemisphere in the depths of winter, and then the Southern Hemisphere comes to. I know we've been spoiled with the weather the last probably year or two in the end of November to play the big games. But if you were to reverse them straight away, I think it would be a far more attractive game, and you're not looking for extra windows. But the problem nowadays is you've 52 weeks in the year, you've probably 40 of them are viable, because with the players' unions and with player welfare, 12 of those weeks. It's essential that the body recovers and its rest periods. So you probably have 40 weeks, and with that, I think if you could get 30 really meaningful games, you'd have a really attractive calendar.
So 30 games is about the optimum for a player to be fully fit and all going well. You could play 30 games a year, could you?
You could. Yeah, you could. You could, yeah. 30, 80 minutes is probably a bit of an ask, but I think when I was firing, I really thought the optimum was kind of 3 out of 4 Saturdays of the month. So, you know what I mean, if that's 9 months of the year, you're up around 27 games, and then you have a 12-week pre-season.
And
but
yeah, like I think if everybody just agreed that was what the story was, then the players aren't going to play all of their league matches, and so the owners of the clubs have to realise that so if you've got 30 games, 10 of those are going to be internationals, or 12 of those are going to be internationals, and the club have you for 18 games, and the compensation gets worked out between, I will pay as the international team 50% of your salary to the clubs, and suddenly we're beginning to look like there's a deal doable at least.
Yeah, but I think then it's the devil is in the detail. It's the nitty gritty. Take Toulouse, for example, where a lot of their players play for France. Okay, and if there's a double header, if there's a top 14 and a French international on it that weekend, because if they're looking to increase the amount of games that the national team are playing, the president of Toulouse isn't going to be very happy with that, because of the fact that he wants his players playing for Toulouse to give his team the best chance of winning. So already, you know what I mean, they're not happy. So
what's the hierarchy? Yeah, and you need to work that out, and they need to be compensated somehow, because there's more money in the game from TV deals or whatever. And here's the thing: there's going to be less money. There's going to be less money for clubs, for people coming through the doors, and there's going to be less money for TV deals as we look on the other side of this, and there's going to be less money from sponsorship too. So I think all of a sudden everything is on the table and everything is up for grabs.
Well, like that, I think that is exactly the key point. And there's, you know, I think we're 55 days in confinement. Today is the first day it's been lifted, and there's a semblance of normality back around the place, with, I suppose, a lot more volume of traffic on the streets over here this morning. But there's still 55 days that have passed. But where are we with the progress we've been, I suppose, attempting to make in the world game? I'm not too sure, because all of a sudden the big focus now, and there's enough of a focus on trying to keep clubs, I suppose, afloat with the financial implications and challenges. But as you rightly pointed out a number of minutes ago, if the people are serious about change, I think if you want to have realistic or improved change, a lot of work has to go into it to get the structures right, because this is the one chance when there has been a pause in any sporting calendar to get it right. So, but I suppose you're going to have to be united, and you have to adapt, and you're going to have to compromise to come up with potential solutions. But I think there is opportunities to get the calendar better.
Do you think these conversations are happening? Like, do you think the ownership groups of the top 14 clubs and the English clubs are actually having these types of conversations with the respective unions, or has everybody kind of become very entrenched over the last while? Understandably enough.
Definitely. I think there's a big meeting on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, between World Rugby and the French and the English League. So, you know, I think I suppose the big issue would be that the history involved in the top 14, they don't really like to move their calendar at all. So World Rugby are looking for example, in October, maybe Ireland playing France again, and are they going to play them a second time? And then all of a sudden, that's another weekend gone for players playing in the top 14, and what's going to happen around Six Nations time, and how many double headers are you going to play at Six Nations time? But that can be, I think, as you said, compromise can be easily reached there. It's just really, really important, I think, that you have I think, really bright people involved in creating a potentially better calendar.
Do you have any idea when you're all going to be allowed to go back to work and resume contact sessions and all that kind of stuff?
No, it was kind of option A, B, C, D and E at this stage nearly, and we're, as a staff, we're kind of working on potential scenarios, and so much is obviously dictated by the health minister in France. But there is a date of September the 5th for the first round of the top 14, and where everyone is kind of working back from that. But there's kind of 3 stages before you even get to that, obviously. So phase 1 is kind of a questionnaire and more and testing, and then phase 2 is kind of like a 3-week period to get the body back to where it probably was before confinement, and then you may have a 7 to 10 week pre-season where you obviously just attack as best you can, and then hope you play 2 friendly games and back to matches on the 5th. But there are so many question marks still in the air over here about how it can possibly take place with social distancing, and obviously economically with the model of, if there aren't people coming to the ground, there are clubs like our club that it wouldn't be sustainable.
Ronan, were you in favour, just out of interest, at the time of abandoning the entire league? Because I think a lot of people have been mentioning over the last couple of weeks about how players and managers are left in limbo quite a bit at the moment, whereas there was a very definitive full stop put on sport in France.
Yeah, it was brutal. I was completely against it in the fact that I was hoping, I understand why it was abandoned, that's it, but like, your whole year is built on playing the knockout rugby, because I think, as a coach, you need that challenge, you need that competitive spirit tested, and even if you fail, I think you get great learnings and you get to taste it. Having worked from last July to now and not have that opportunity, it gnaws at you big time. And I think that was why it was so difficult, because there was great rumours at the time that maybe there might be just the teams in the top 6 now. So 1 plays, the first 2 go through, and 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5. So we would have played the 4 teams. So, but like, you're essentially 160 minutes away from a final, which is a great position to be in, or a great mindset to have for you and your players when you're coming back. But that's been abandoned now, and I suppose it's a void year, as they call it. So, but like, if you're a sporting person and you're a competitor, you need finals footy. That's what you're judged on.
That's the whole reason for everything existing. Here, listen, at least you did make the final and all the way up to the Mount in Mount Rushmore, Cork Sporting Mount Rushmore. Of all the achievements in your career, Ronan, the thousands and thousands of points, the hundreds of caps, all those appearances, the brilliant coaching career, finally it's all distilled down to Cork Sporting Mount Rushmore. You made it, buddy.
I did. Jeez, that was big. It was some talent in Cork, isn't there? Wow. A few of the GAA boys weren't happy, but it was, it was my sporting hero. I was contesting, I think, against Jimmy Barry Murphy. So once you're in that company, everything is good. There was obviously a few non-negotiables, and Sonia and Roy, obviously. And who else got there?
Christy Ring, I think.
Christy Ring, yes, of course. That's before my time, so I don't have appreciation, but you've always got to respect the past, don't you? There's always a past.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, I believe, is the phrase we're all reaching for.
No, but it's very, very special. Believe me, I think it becomes more special when you're on the couch, because when I'm listening to the show every morning, and you can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though, because if something unfortunately inside me that's ultra competitive, and I need to be there, and that's my mindset, and thankfully you get there because of a bloody good team you played on as well. That's the most important thing, I think there's so many situations where you can analyse a game if you're behind the beaten pack as well, So a great honour. Meath is up this morning. Are the results out?
The results are not out. Tommy Rooney is standing by.
Yeah, I was chatting to Tommy. I gave Tommy my votes.
Who did you stick on?
Well, for three, I had three definites. I went Sean Boylan, Graham Geraghty and Trevor Giles. Trevor Giles was an amazing player. And then I was leaning to Colm O'Rourke, and then I got sent through video clippage of Mick Lyons. So I said, I forgot about him. He was an animal. So he's straight in. But you have Barry Geraghty, you have Noel Meade, you have all the Horsey contingent.
Johnny Murtagh.
Johnny Murtagh. Oh, wow. Well, Johnny Murtagh is a genius, I think, when it came to riding horses, So
I might try and steal him for Kildare, though, if he doesn't make it on to Meath today. So.
And Shane Horgan, what county is Shane Horgan?
Shane Horgan's Meath. No ifs, ands or buts, he's Meath, yeah.
He qualifies for a few counties, no?
He went to school in Louth, I think, but...
yeah, well, exactly, so... well, Shaggy is definitely up there, yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Look, when you were talking about competitiveness, you reminded me of Michael Jordan right there. I don't know if you've seen the documentary, if you're watching it, but...
Oh, that's a compliment. No, I haven't, and...
You'll enjoy it.
I hear, yeah, it's on the list. I was so far behind in my own work, Jared, that I needed to... I kind of went podcast first, and I haven't got onto any visual stuff, so... I think for other people too, those leaders' questions that yourself and Stuart did were brilliant as well. I think there's so many nuggets in them from people all around the world. That's a great, I suppose, it's a great tool for anyone involved in sport. I found those fascinating. Maybe I'm 18 months too late, am I?
No.
Was that 18 months ago or 6 months ago?
Yeah, that was 18 months. So we did 2 series of it. There's 2 seasons of it out. We must republish those at this time and maybe get another few in the can.
Yeah, they're good. They're really good.
Right, well, on that note, thanks very much for all that.
Good man.
Plenty of food for thought. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
See you guys. Cheers. See you.
Ronan O'Gara with some thoughts there on what should be the Meath Sporting Meath Rushmore. We're going to get to that in just a moment. 087 180 180 is the number to WhatsApp us on here. Next up is our How's the Head this morning, and it's Galway ladies footballer Tracy Leonard, who was their captain in last year's All-Ireland final. Tracy is also a COVID-19 tester at University Hospital Galway and has worked at their drive-in testing centre. She also speaks here about her concerns about games behind closed doors. Here's Galway star Tracy Leonard on How's the Head.
I think the weeks have been steady. I think I was lucky enough. I suppose I had a job and I still had to go to work each morning and that. But I must say, I think everyone probably did their bit, and I don't think the spread of the virus went as mad, I think, as other countries, which, in one way, I think we can cross blessings in skies that it didn't come. I think it's hard, but I think that's down to everyone, not alone people in the hospitals and that, but I think, the general public and that they did what they were told. They obeyed, I think the 2 kilometres, and they obeyed the staying at home. So I think, I think everyone has played their part in this, but at the minute it seems to be quite steady there in the hospital. So, I think I'm lucky enough as well. I work with, a lovely bunch of colleagues at work, and, I think everyone pulls together in these sorts of things, and I think, we're blessed to be in such an island like Ireland that, community spirit is a lot to be said for. We were probably gone so busy in the hospital that you were passing out people and not being as friendly and that. And it's people that you might know that particularly well in the hospital now. I think people are going out of their way, I think, to be a bit more friendly, and it's no harm. It's nice to see, because as I said, I think, the whole world was gone so busy, and it's nice to see that you can have time now to actually chat to people, and people that you maybe didn't really know that well, they have a bit more time to get to know. But it's definitely, I think, something in Ireland that, I think we have to be really proud of, that, we have that such a spirit that when things, when the going gets tough, like this coronavirus has hit Ireland, that I think, we've all kind of come together, and hopefully you're getting out the other side of it. But I suppose it's probably a bit too early to say now yet at the minute, but I think going in the right direction. I'm well supported by a great bunch of colleagues at work, and I think the hospital, to be fair to them, we were initially, I suppose, doing the test, and I suppose you are, I suppose, a bit of a high risk. But, you know, one thing was concerned at the start, I suppose, was I'm living at home and I suppose coming home in the evenings. But, you know, I suppose I'm lucky enough that, you know, both my parents and my brother are in quite good health. So, you know, that concern, I suppose, at the outset was one I had. But again, facilities were put in place for us. There's never a day we weren't without the protective equipment. You know, we were well gowned up, great showering facilities there. And I suppose, look, all you could have done was controlled what you could have controlled. And we did that, and, you know, continuing to do that. So, you know, I suppose, you know, while I do that, I probably don't have any concerns, and you're just kind of going from day to day and hoping that, you know, you're carrying out what you can do, and I suppose that's all you can do at the minute. When you look at what's going on in the world and so many lives have been lost, and, you know, especially I suppose with me being in the healthcare profession, and you see such restriction on visitors in the hospital, and you see loved ones dying, not surrounded by family, I suppose that probably to me at the minute is quite, you know, I suppose sad, but it just puts sport in perspective. I think that while I would have, before all this happened, I would have seen, you know, sport as a huge part. You know, you slept it, you ate it, you know, that kind of way. It was all you ever thought of. But I suppose, yeah, getting back to your question, it probably is frustrating. I suppose we had been on a building process, I suppose, the last few years. But look, I think, you know, there's quite a young panel there in Galway, and I suppose even this year, seeing a lot of new faces coming in for Galway. In comparison to our starting team for the All-Ireland final last year, there's a lot of new players coming along there. So I think, you know, the future is bright. While this year, if it does return, we'll probably get to see a lot more of them players. But you know, I think it's probably hopefully a starting point for Galway. I think, you know, it has been building, but I suppose last year was probably quite a good year getting to 2 league finals. I know, despite not coming away with any silverware, but you know, I think Dublin. I think one of the Dublin girls I remember mentioned to me that I think they got better than 3 All-Irelands before they won one. So, you know, I think it probably takes sometimes a lot of defeats before success comes. So hopefully that's coming down the road for us. If I'm being honest, no. I think it's a bit risky at the minute. I think it's something that, you know, is probably a whole lot is really not known about it. And my view on it is, you know, for people that have respiratory illnesses, like I know there is a lot of girls playing that are known asthmatics. And, you know, my view on it is that, like, you know, while me could be perfectly fine and healthy and don't have any respiratory illnesses, could be a carrier, could be carrying it, could feel 100% fine, and the player marking me is an asthmatic. You know, while we're playing a game for 60, 65 minutes, and it is quite close contact football, I think, you know, I think it is too risky. While I would love to see it resume, I just think, you know, I think health is priority at this point. Now, what may change by you know, I don't think anyone really knows, and, you know, could change from month to month. But right now, I just think it's far too risky. I think, you know, I think at the end of the day, our health is, I think, priority there. Probably our country has been under severe pressure, you know, before this. And I know with a lot of what has gone on, I'm sure, you know, budgets have gone well through the roof. So I think it will be quite a big ask, I suppose, putting that to governments, you know, having every player tested. And that would need to be for every game, you know, which between men's and women's would be a lot of games in the run of the year. So I don't know if it's really feasible. And for the sake of 1 year, and I know some people might jump down my throat when I say this, but for the sake of 1 year, I don't know, are people as well just chillax, I think, and maybe look to 2021. But, you know, I could be proved wrong. Hopefully I may be, but I just think it's a bit too risky at the minute.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
They had one more day to rest. we were really in trouble to build the team.
And the best bits from Off the Ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Oh, sweaty palms. Of course, you guys know what it's like, but that was nervy, yeah.
The OTB Brief, online every morning from 7 a.m. on offtheball.com, the Go Loud app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
OTB Sports Radio.
Here at OTB, we're not just about sport. Our man Richie McCormick knows his tunes. Every day at midday, Richie will be bringing us his isolation mix. It's an hour of music to help you switch off from the workday, even if you're working from home. Stick on the mix, get some fresh air, and take a walk while remembering to keep your 2-meter social distance, of course. That's Richie's isolation mix every day at midday on OTB Sports Radio. Listen on the Go Loud app or at offtheball.com/radio.
OTB AM.
Look up on Patrick's Hill. Who would you take down? Who would you take down?
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
The Meath edition. It is time for the most important, it's always very important that we do these counties and we get them correct, but Tommy Rooney is obviously the producer of this show and he has taken it upon himself to represent his own county. I feel sympathy for him. In some respect, I have awe. Obviously, Tommy, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are we all?
How did you sleep last night?
Do you know what? I've been involved in the booking and the production of this slot for a long time, and most of the selectors I've chosen have always said they've struggled to sleep, and it was no different last night. I struggled to sleep last night. I've been fairly consistent in my thinking in terms of who I'm going for. I haven't really changed over the last while, but it's still a struggle. You're going to find it yourselves next week, Ger, and Eoin will find himself a Kerry as well. It's a struggle.
We will also welcome Hector Ó to the show. Hector, that's the 1988 jersey, is it?
Yeah, I decided to go back to the early days. This is the retro Honey Badger jersey from the glorious days of the 80s. I just would like to greet everyone listening on Off the Ball this morning in the dulcet tones of Meath men. Well, Ger, well, Eoin, well, Tommy.
Well, Hector, how are we?
Well. There are many ways of saying well.
Well, there's a couple of ways of saying well. It depends on what part of Meath you're from. Are you from Northern Avon? Are you from Southern Avon? We won't get into the pseudo-dubs who are on the Dublin border, but we'll keep this one to proper Meath men, this Rushmore today.
Is Dean Rock on your Mount Rushmore there, Tommy?
I can tell you, I can confirm right now that Dean Rock is not on my Mount Rushmore, but I don't know about you, Hector, but I know you've got a piece coming up at Barney Rock pretty soon. I think you might have a story there for us about why he should be on Meath's.
Yeah, I will reveal that in a few minutes' time. The controversy surrounding the Rock family and how close they were for signing for Meath.
I mean, look, this is actually the end of GAA as we know it, where the Dubs are actually taking players from beyond the county border and turning them into all-time great superstars. Dean Rock would this year have become the highest scoring, it looks like the highest scoring footballer in all of history. And he could have been playing for Meath. And I think Meath, actually, now that I think of it, have stolen Davy Dalton's children, who may well be as good as Davy Dalton, for all I know, from Kildare. It's a scandalous state of affairs. We're not going to go down that road.
No, we're not going to go down that road. I can confirm that Dublin play a massive role in my Mount Rushmore for Meath. They play a really huge role, but it's because a lot of the people I've chosen have absolutely sickened the Dubs time and time again throughout their time.
Well, we can all get behind that. Four of us can get behind that.
Do we want to get into it?
We will. Okay, so just to explain to everybody, Tommy is the selector, Hector is the challenger, and it can remove one of Tommy's selections and fix it, edit it. We like to think of it in many respects. And then we get a last pitch from Mickey Burke for somebody. Tommy, you're going to propose 4 candidates for this as we go along, and you get to keep 3 of them guaranteed. So you've already told us Sean Boylan, number 1. Give us your pie-in to Sean.
Well, Sean Boylan is number 1, lads. Like, there just is no question about it. And I felt really strongly about it that this should not be questioned. It just shouldn't be. I put pen to paper over the weekend and I wrote a piece about it. You could call it a love letter of sorts to Sean and the impact that he's had on Meath football. I genuinely don't know what Meath's Mount Rushmore would look like if Sean Boylan hadn't A, taken the job in 1982, hadn't B, rode out the storm in 1985 when Laois hammered them, hadn't C, rode out the storm in 1992 when Laois bet them, D, stayed after Dublin bet them and there's people calling for his head. Like, if Sean Boylan hadn't transcended those 3 generations for Meath football, I'm not sure if we'd be talking about Colin O'Rourke today. I don't know if we'd be talking about Mick Lyons. Who knows if Graham Geraghty or Trevor Giles would have fulfilled their potential. There is no Meath Mount Rushmore without Sean Boylan. That's just the way it is. And he is number one, undisputed. I've seen people challenge the fact that perhaps Brian Cody mightn't even make Kerry's. Will Mick Kilkenny's. Will Mick O'Dwyer make Kerry's? I don't know. Like, look, some people have said that managers shouldn't be on it. That managers aren't as important as sports people. But they're like, Sean Boylan is Meath's greatest ever sports person.
Absolutely. 100%. Tommy, I'll back you 100% on that.
Why do we think that managers have been left out to date?
I was astounded to think.
I don't know. It's just interesting that you mentioned that, Tommy, that some people would consider some of the great managers not part of a Mount Rushmore because they perhaps hadn't reached the same athletic heights as the players that they managed. But I'd agree with you. I think that's a ridiculous notion, especially when you talk about the importance of Boylan as a figure.
Yeah, like, look, that may be a factor when it comes into other counties down the line. I can understand it if you're in a county such as perhaps Cork, where there's people who have achieved such incredible heights in global sport around the world. But when it comes to Meath, like, for me, we're talking about football country here. And I know you'd probably have the same problem yourself when you get down to Kerry, but for me, this football country. And like, I'll be mentioning a couple of Olympians later on. I'll be mentioning a couple of rugby heads. I'm absolutely delighted that Hector is on the line with us this morning, that he can give the context of the great racing heritage that there is in Meath. But for me, like, there is only one sport in Meath. Like, we don't have an Irish soccer international. We've never had one. Like, we've had a couple of lads go over to the AFL over the last couple of years, but to me, I feel really bad about that because Meath football has suffered for that. For Sean Boylan, like, you know, Sean Boylan's first love was hurling. In 1982, he was the masseuse for the Meath football team. And he was not in the mix for the job. He was actually going for the hurling job. And he said it himself that, and it's been often said, that Meath sport was on the brink around 1949, before they won their first ever All-Ireland, when Father Patrick Tully was the chairman and the manager for 20 years over Meath GAA. He led them to 3 All-Irelands and to 7 Leinster titles. And it was often said back then that Meath sport could have gone one of 2 ways. It was either football or hurling, and football took off. And it defines Meath people. Like, the team of the 80s and the 90s, we take such pride in the fact that they were seen as such hardy, ignorant folk, that they were hard to excuse my language, they were hard to beat. I'm getting too round here now thinking about it, but
Tommy, you're grand, you're grand.
I took serious pride growing up. Excuse me there, yeah. So, like, I went to school in Monaghan. I always had to fight my corner. As Shane Hannon said earlier on, I'm a complete outsider. I always had to fight my corner about being the one token Meath man in the school. And that's something I took great pride in throughout my life. And without Sean Boylan, that would not have happened. I wouldn't have been able to stand up and say, I don't care that we were having won All-Ireland in the last 15 years.
Okay.
We have the team of 87, the team of 88.
Okay.
The boys of 91 who came back from so many points against Dublin and nearly did it.
Okay, we got it.
Tommy, I'm with you. I'm with you on this, Tommy. I can feel the passion and the feeling, Tommy. I can feel your blood boiling. Like, I feel that you're ready to go out in a dressing room with the smell of wintergreen and you are ready to take to the pitch as a Meath man. I can feel that. And that's what Sean Boylan brought to Meath football. Nobody wanted the job in 1980, 81. Mick O'Brien was there before. Meath football was in crisis before Sean Boylan took over. Sean Boylan lifted the county, the people, the players, and the whole of every single man, woman and child in village and town in Meath for over 15 or 20 years. Sean Boylan ranks up there with one of the greatest coaches in global sport. He has to go on to Mount Rushmore. He's an absolute iconic legend, a positive, great Meath man who was the gel and the man, the instigator, the man manager, one of the greatest of all time in Irish sport.
Hector, I want to ask you for your opinion on this, because Tommy, on his piece on offtheball.com, captured brilliantly what is the great enigma of Sean Boylan, is that anybody who has ever met him recognises him as one of the world's great gentlemen, and who is a healer, who is literally, his day job is to help people to get better. And you can kind of feel yourself just getting better in his company. And yet, as Tommy points out, his team were cold, hard assassins. They went out there and they were killers. How did that happen? How did he create that killing mentality? It's amazing. It's an amazing achievement that he has.
Personally, I don't think Sean Boylan would ever tell a Meath man to go out and do it. I think he got them to realise that they're not going to win in All-Ireland unless they play this brand of football, this physical brand of football. I would never think that Sean Boylan went out and told lads to do a job on a player. Not the Sean Boylan that I know, but I think he got these big, proud, physical, great Meath footballers right through the spine of the team, from Mick Lyons to Liam Harnan to Liam Hayes to Jerry McEntee to Joe Castles to Brian Stafford to Colin O'Rourke. And then he told them that, lads, this is your chance of being great. And to be great, you need to win in All-Ireland. And he got them believing in themselves. I'd say these guys were playing outstanding club football for the likes of Summerhill and Waterstown and Navan O'Mahony's and Screen and all the great clubs of Meath, until Boylan got them together as a unit and as a man manager, spoke to them individually and got them to gel as a team. And once they started winning, the avalanche started, and it was an absolute super time in Meath during the late 80s, 90s.
Okay, so we can all agree that's straight on Mount Rushmore, no ifs, ands or buts, and he's totally deserved. Tommy, who's next?
100%. Sorry, lads, I just have to be honest there. My connection was quite poor for a few minutes, so I was kind of bluffing with my questions and my answers. But I did hear Eoin say that Sean Boylan's athleticism perhaps would have been the one thing that would have let him down. He obviously played hurling for Meath, and in that story, in that piece I put up at the weekend, there's a great yarn about a fight that broke up between Bernie Flynn and Andy McEntee in training one day. The two lads were baiting each other. And we all know that training sessions, like whether you're going for a championship at club level or at inter-county level, it's the matches that you have in training are the one thing that get you ready for winning a championship. And the Meath training sessions were fierce. Mick Lyons used to batter the lads. Robbie O'Malley used to mark Bernard Flynn, and he knew that it was the best player that he could mark in the country at the time. But Andy McEntee and Bernard Flynn were baiting each other one day, and Boylan sent them to do laps. They ran around the pitch a couple of times, and when they got to the far corner, they started baiting each other again. And as the story goes, Boylan stopped the session. There were hundreds of Meath people there. He chased them down. He shoved the two boys in the chest, and he told them that he'd take the two of them on himself if they didn't stop messing. So that's how he dealt with it. He was an incredible sportsman too, and well worth his place. Number 2, Mick Lyons. I cannot look at Meath's Mount Rushmore and not have the chiseled jaw of Mick Lyons sitting up there.
Just because it looks good now, Tommy, just because it looks good, does he deserve his place?
He absolutely deserves his place, Ger. Like he was the captain in '87. He was the first man that Sean Boylan turned to lead that team to an All-Ireland title. He put the fear of God into anybody before Paul O'Connell came about. There's an unbelievable clip from, or a paragraph from Con Houlihan off the back of the 1991 saga in Dublin. And he wrote that, "I wouldn't be surprised to hear that there are small boys in Dublin who believe that Mick Lyons is kept in a cage above in Summerhill and fed with raw meat." Mick is as mild a man as you could find in the world outside of football. His main fault in the pitch is that at times he is reluctant to turn the other cheek. Nevertheless, a section of Dublin followers have appointed him as public enemy number 1. And many people think of Mick Lyons as a hard man, but I think of him as a footballer first. He was first class. Mick Lyons took frees off the ground for Summerhill for years. He was a superstar at football, never mind being the hardiest man you could ever come across. And we put out that clip a couple of weeks ago when we watched that classic game club back of the Meath and Cork game, and it was an incredibly poor game in terms of quality. Cork obviously won the All-Ireland, but Mick Lyons got buried in the face by Colm O'Neill. He just stood there, walked away and had the collar up. He never reacted to anything like that. There was an aura about Mick Lyons, and for me that's incredibly important when we're talking about a Rushmore. You want to look up to that mountain and see those heads and look up to it and be proud of it. And Mick Lyons couldn't have made you prouder to be a Meath man.
Was he even the best defender on the team, Hector?
I'm going to have to. When can I start disagreeing, or do I?
You can disagree the whole way along, and at the end you can tell us which one you're going to change. So,
right. Well, Tommy, I understand what you're saying about Mick Lyons, but I just cannot have him chiselled onto the side of a mountain. I agree with you. Mick Lyons was an outstanding fullback for Meath. Mick Lyons was more like the innkeeper, the landlord. He was the prison officer who patrolled the area. He would do a job on the full forward and anyone who came into his territory. But I don't think I could have him as a fullback, as one of the outstanding fullbacks that goes onto a mountain aside for 1,000 immortality. Yes, he was a great fullback. Yes, he did a job. Yes, he broke jaws, but yes, he was a good footballer. And we have many good fullbacks. Darren Fay, you can't talk about Mick Lyons without mentioning Darren Fay from Trim. Darren Fay was an absolute peach of a fullback, maybe a better footballer, but I agree Mick Lyons would stand at the bottom of Hill 16 and deck Joe McNally already before the ball was thrown in, and that's what we loved about him. And the referee has blown it up here, and Mick Lyons is standing with his hands in the air, and the referee is going down to the and we love Mick Lyons for what he did, but I cannot have him as. We have 4 places. I could not have Mick Lyons up there in front of other great fullbacks that we've produced, because we've produced great fullbacks over the years. Outstanding footballer, but I disagree with you about Mick Lyons. I'm surprised, Tommy, with that. I'm surprised. I am too. Martin O'Connell is like on the team of the millennium and like is part of both teams. He has that perfect, like he is one of those assassins. Ask Peter Canavan, but he was one of the cavalry that you called for in was it still in '97? He was coming off the bench against Kildare at that time. Tommy, I don't know what happened. Why was Martin O'Connell, or is he in your team?
No, Martin O'Connell's not in my 4 lads. And I completely agree with Hector there. Like, it was a very difficult decision. And for me, when I sat down, and I mentioned it earlier that Meath is football country, like, I had to make a decision here. Was I going to choose 3 footballers? And that is kind of where I was leaning for a lot of the time, alongside Sean Boylan. Meath have had so many unbelievable forwards that a defender had to be in the mix as well. And, like, Hector, you didn't mention Robbie O'Malley there, and I know you'd be able to give us great context in terms of how good a defender he was. The fact that Mark O'Shea is the only other cornerback that has won an All-Star. I think we're completely underestimating how important Mick Lyons was to Meath football. Like, I think we're completely underestimating the aura that he had across Meath football. Like, a clubmate of mine, Donegal Boyle, who works in the Irish Independent, tweeted it a couple of months ago that back around 2006, and this kind of just gives you an example of what type of esteem that Mick Lyons has held in the Meath. Back in 2006, my own club, Meath Hill, were playing Summerhill in the Championship. Mick Lyons was the manager of the Summerhill team at the time, and Meath Hill bet them. And it was around the time that Meath Hill were still without a championship in about 16 years, and they found out that every year they'd end up losing a quarter-final to the team who would end up go on and win Meath and then go on and win Leinster that same year. Anyways, they bet Summerhill. Mick Lyons came into the dressing room afterwards, and as he did, said a few words, said, "Lads, I hope you go on and win it." And the lads were all in awe of him. And one of the lads turned to Donegal at the end and asked, "Should we be genuflecting here?" Like, that is the absolute esteem that Mick Lyons is held in. And like Martin O'Connell, yes, an unbelievable footballer. But Martin O'Connell has his team of the millennium. He has it. Like, Philip Lanigan's written a great book about the 4 kings of Meath, and it's like fullbacks are king in Meath. And I couldn't go for Darren Fay because of my third choice. I'd love to pick Darren Fay, but I couldn't fall into the same I suppose, issue that some other selectors have fallen for. Hang on.
Martin O'Connell, All-Ireland Senior Football Final, Man of the Match, 1988, replay. Footballer of the Year, 1996. And on the team of the millennium.
No, Trevor Giles, Footballer of the Year, 96.
Texco Footballer of the Year, this is.
Okay, yeah, of course. Look, he's team of the millennium. Like, Martin O'Connell was an incredible wing back. Unbelievable. Like, but we had so many legends when it comes to football. Like, if Mick Lyons doesn't make that block in Jimmy Kerrigan in 1987, there is no first All-Ireland for Sean Boylan, and the rest of it probably doesn't happen.
Who's next?
Who's next on my Mount Rushmore? Like, okay, I'll be honest, I settled on Mick Lyons very early on, and Hector's words there have kind of rattled me a little bit. Like, I thought to be a bit more consensus when it came to choosing Mick Lyons as my number 2, and I'm still going to be quite belligerent in the fact that I'm choosing him. Number 3 was much more difficult. It was much more difficult.
Who's in the conversation?
Try and tell me this, Ger. Who's a better full forward line? Bernie Flynn, Brian Stafford and Colin O'Rourke, or Trevor Dowd, Ollie Murphy and Brendan Riley? And that's without even mentioning Trevor Giles or Graham Geraghty. I'm not even going back to the likes of Matty Kerrigan here. I'm forgetting about Jack Quinn and Paddy O'Brien, who I can't give any context to. But Meath had such an incredible array of forwards and classy forwards, top of their game in the 90s and in the late 80s.
Flynn, Stafford and O'Rourke did it for longer. That was the their longevity is 4 or 5 seasons where they are the best full forward line in the country for that period of time. The other lads had 2 great seasons together as a line, and then they moved around. Was Tommy Dowd's best position in the full forward line? Maybe it was, but
maybe 11. Yeah, you're right. And look, Brendan Riley was transformed from a corner back to a corner forward. They're not like Tommy Dowd. I'd love to choose. He would have been the second Meath Hill manager to make it onto Mount Rushmore if I had decided to choose Tommy Dowd, the second former Meath Hill manager. But I couldn't do that. I wanted to choose Colin O'Rourke. I agonised over that one. Hector, he taught Hector in school. He'd be able to tell you a lot more about Colin O'Rourke, but I haven't gone for Colin O'Rourke. And I haven't gone for Trevor Giles. For me, growing up, Trevor Giles was important, but he wasn't Graham Geraghty. He just wasn't Graham Geraghty. And for me, Graham Geraghty represents something about Meath that is it's hard to quantify. There's an edge to him, and it's an edge that Meath needs. And he always brought it to him when he came to a football pitch. And as hard as he played, and as hard as he worked as a footballer, he had unbelievable skill too, unparalleled when it came to skill in Meath football. Graham Geraghty, top of the charts.
What percentage of this decision was down to the jawline?
Well, Mick Lyons, it was a massive factor, and when it comes to Geraghty, it was probably a decent factor as well. It's nearly as well as you can take a punch.
Tommy, are you putting Graham in?
Hector, I'm going for Graham. I'm going for Graham Geraghty at number 3. I don't know. There's silence there, lads. Growing up, everyone wanted to be Graham Geraghty at my age when we were growing up.
Right, we're just going to re-establish the connection to Hector there. I think, Hector, can you hear us okay?
I'm hearing you perfect. I think there's a bit of a delay.
Grant, what do you think of Graham Geraghty?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Graham Geraghty is probably one of the best-looking Meath men to ever put on a jersey. He had swagger. He was blonde. I'll tell you a good one. We went to watch Manchester United. He's a United fan. We went over to watch Man City League Cup replay in Old Trafford. Myself and about 4 lads from me. Graham was in the group. I roomed with Graham in a city centre Manchester hotel. So we had a few beers. Manchester United, I think it was a late winner. I think we won 3-2 on the night. And then we went out for a night in Manchester. The next morning, I awoke in the hotel in Manchester at about 6:45, searching for my painkillers, searching for a glass of water. And then I heard a bit of shuffling. And as I looked over to the window, Graham Geraghty stood naked at the window and opened the curtains. And I saw a silhouetted image of his body in a hotel in Manchester. A colossus of a man naked in front of me. And I said, this is Graham Geraghty. He's naked in my room in front of me. The great Graham Geraghty, who stood in front of Hill 16. I said, I am blessed. I'm blessed. I am a blessed Meath man to see his chiseled arse, a magnificent back, the muscles beaming down his back, a beautifully chiseled man. And I said, fuck the hangover. I'm in heaven.
You know, it's just his head that we get on this. It's not like a full frontal. It's just his head on Mount Rushmore. The rest of it's implied.
The way the sunlight in Manchester just pitched down on his body. He's a colossus. He's a colossus of a man. But should he go up on the side of a mountain? No, Tommy. No, I cannot have Graham Geraghty. Why?
Really?
Graham Geraghty had swagger. Graham Geraghty had charisma. Graham Geraghty mightn't do anything for 40, 50 minutes, and then he would shut the hill up in one go. But was he there every time, every minute? Was he the man, the go-to man on that team? No, not when you had possibly the greatest player of all time to put on a Meath jersey, playing in that team. The man they all wanted on the ball, the Michel Platini of Meath, the conductor of the orchestra, one of the greatest footballers of the country, hands down, Trevor Giles. Trevor Giles, I am absolutely shocked that you're not putting Trevor Giles up on that mountain.
I knew this would cause ructions. I knew I'd cause trouble by not choosing Trevor Giles. I knew it, but maybe I don't know why I wasn't in love with Trevor Giles the same way I was with Graham Geraghty as a footballer. I don't know why, Hector. Maybe it's the fact that I remember the missed penalties in the All-Ireland finals, and maybe that's a really cheap thing for me to say. But Trevor Giles was a legend, an unbelievable footballer. But for me, it's Graham Geraghty. Like he represented something about Meath. He was a rogue. He did something for Meath, people that I don't think many others could do. Like he
Trevor
made it feel
Giles
like
almost like he's like a Cantona figure. He gives you a bit of brilliance, but Trevor Giles wanted the size 5. He took that ball and he looked around and he saw things and channels that no other footballer wanted, no other footballer saw. He would take his scores, he would take his goals, he would spread the play. He used 6 different parts of the boot. He had 6 different ways to kick a ball. He was an absolute genius of a footballer. Trevor Giles ranks up there with Jack Quinn as probably the 2 greatest footballers who ever played for Meath.
Right, this is interesting. This is where we get into the level of contention. So let's move on, because so Tommy, you've got 3, right? You've got Graham Geraghty, Mick Lyons, and Sean Boylan. Sean Boylan, we agree with. The other 2 are points of contention. Get to number 4, and then we'll ask Hector for his 4, and he's going to edit yours already. There are many changes he wants to make. Now, you're not finalised just yet, Tommy. There's another pitch to be made, but go on.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit rattled here, lads. To be honest, I don't know. Maybe it's because of where I'm coming from. Like I'm coming from Meath Hill. Like we're often the forgotten club when it comes to Meath. Like sure, we have Meath in our name, but a lot of people in the county of Meath don't know where Meath Hill is. And perhaps I've carried that with me into this discussion today, because I've gone for someone like Graham Geraghty, who perhaps is an outsider across the country, who, like, we'll come back to it again. Like, I understand how important Trevor Giles is in the history of Meath football. I understand how important Martin O'Connell is.
Maybe I've come
in with the wrong way of thinking here. I'm afraid to present my 4th here.
Hang on, Tommy. Hang on for a second. Hang on for a second. Trevor Giles is the only player in history to have won the Footballer of the Year twice.
Sure.
I didn't know that. You got to change it. Anyway, go on. Number 4.
Number 4, right. I wanted to pick 4 footballers, and I kind of just felt I couldn't. I feel like now I should. Look, I'll be honest, perhaps I'm doing a disservice to many great sports people in the county of Meath when I'm going to mention them quickly. Like Devin Toner was in with a shout. Darren Sutherland spent many of his years in Meath. Olympic medal, obviously. Kieran McDonough was a fantastic athlete. There was many golfers. There were cyclists. I'll be honest, I haven't gone for a horse racing pick here because, and maybe I'm taking the easy way out, I know about Hector's stock when it comes to horse racing in Meath. I know we can put our heritage in horse racing into context. And for me, horse racing is an incredibly important sport in Meath. But I'd only be bluffing if I was to try and pick somebody ahead of Hector. I'd be going, if I was to go for Barry Geraghty, I know Hector would make a much more compelling case for Johnny Murtagh or Nina Carberry, or he'd even argue me into choosing Barry Geraghty if I hadn't chosen him. But I've gone for a 4th choice here, and perhaps it's a safe choice. I think he's legitimately a proper contender for Meath Mount Rushmore. He is the orchestrator, not the orchestrator, he's the finisher of perhaps one of the most iconic moments in Irish sport this century. Shane Horgan. He's a Meath man through and through. Like, grew up in Bellewstown. He'll always be a Meath man. I feel like I needed to go outside of the grapevine of GAA and just show that we're much more than GAA. But like Horgan had an unbelievable career with Leinster. He was a top try scorer, played in that team with O'Driscoll and Darcy, and he was always a star. And for me, it always made me incredibly proud to be from Meath when Shane Horgan was touching down against England in Croke Park. That was a massive moment in sport for me in Ireland, and I am like sticking by Shane Horgan as my fourth choice. He also was a good GAA player, and he could have been a footballer for Meath for many years if he'd stuck with it. Hector, what do you think?
I can't have Shane Horgan anywhere near the mountain, even though he's an outstanding rugby player. I think what you're doing, Tommy, is you're diluting yourself like a My Waddy drink. Meath are GAA, and yes, I agree. We have athletes, and we have cyclists, and we have other sporting people. But Meath is not rugby. Meath is racing. Meath is horse racing. It's in our blood. We have the best, most luscious grass in the country, some of the finest stud farms. We produce some of the greatest jockeys in the world. And to put a rugby player from Meath on the side of a mountain, Tommy, I'm absolutely outstanding. I'm astounded. And Shane Horgan, yes, when he rose majestically in Croke Park, 35 foot into the air to collect that ball, to drop it over and score that try. Yes, he rose majestically like Graham Geraghty or Joe Sheridan. But does he deserve a place on the mountain? Can you put him on the mountain? Can you put him on the side of this mountain forever? Beside Sean Boylan, beside whoever, he has been a great rugby player, but Meath is, and this is no disrespect to any other sports in Meath. Meath is GAA, it's football and it's horse racing. It's in our DNA and it's in our blood. And if you put Shane Horgan in front of the likes of Tom Draper, one of the greatest trainers of all time, or Barry Geraghty, or Paul Carberry, or Nina Carberry, or Johnny Murtagh, I just can't have that. When can I start talking about racing? Let's go. Because every single jockey who comes into this studio for Friday Night Racing, when Johnny Ward asks them, and what jockeys are the best, the first one they always go to is Carberry. They always say he was the greatest horseman I ever saw. And it's one of those, like, it's an indefinable thing. No one can actually capture exactly what they mean by it. But they always say, well, if you were in a race with him, you saw it. You just saw him do things that nobody else could do. His control of a horse was better than anybody else's. And if they're saying that in Ireland, the level that he's already operating at suggests that he's way above, he's top 10 in the world's history if he's that good. So I'm guessing he's on your Mount Rushmore, is he? Yes. He's on my list. I'll just go through them very quickly because we're blessed. First of all, we have to talk about the flat. Before we get to Carberry, we talk about the one and only Johnny Murtagh, who never rode a horse till he was 15 years of age, born about 4 miles from me in the parish of Bohermeen outside of Navan. Johnny Murtagh has ridden over 100 Group 1 winners. Johnny Murtagh went to John Ox's yard straight out of race, and then his career brought him to the highest level all over the world. He's won all the Irish Classics. He's won all the races in Royal Ascot. He's won the Arc de Triomphe. He's run races in Dubai. He's won races at the Breeders' Cup. I went to the Breeders' Cup hanging with Hector with Aidan O'Brien when I slept on a plane carrier with Henry the Navigator and Duke of Marmalade, 39,000 feet in the air, as we brought the best of the Ballydoyle horses to go to war for $25 million at the Breeders' Cup. Johnny Murtagh thrived on the big day. His roll of honour on Wikipedia, his Wikipedia page goes on for 7 pages with all his classics and his Group 1 winners. I mean, it takes 2.5 days to read Johnny Murtagh's Wikipedia. It goes on and on and on. A lovely pair of hands, a tight pair of knees as he gets down and drives that horse over the line on the big day, dressed in those fun, magnificent Coolmore silks. Johnny Murtagh ranks as one of the greatest flat jockeys in global racing. So how do we not get him up on the mountain? Then we have to go to the national hunt. Paul Carberry rode a Grand National winner, Bobby Joe. Paul Carberry's won every big race in Ireland. Paul Carberry has the highest arse in Irish racing. His arse would fly high. He really has. The reason why he had the soft hands was because he had those lovely high arse tones. He would coax a horse into a race, nice and quiet like this. Shh, I'm coming, here I come. He rode a winner for me in the Galway handicap hurdle over 3 miles on my horse. By the way, my horse was called Steve Coppell, named after the Manchester United winger, but we spelled Coppell Capall, Steve Horse. Trained by Noel Meade, ridden by Paul Carberry. He gave me one of the greatest days of my life in Ballybrit. Paul Carberry comes from racing royalty. Now, if we move from Paul Carberry, who was a brilliant jockey, to Nina Carberry, I was with her doing a live radio show for Jerry Ryan. We did it for 10 years in a row from Cheltenham. Nina Carberry, 2005, rode her first winner, a first female jockey to win at Cheltenham in 18 years. Nina Carberry rode Paul Nolan's Gabaroon. I was there. I've seen her winning all the big races. She farmed the cross-country at Cheltenham. Nina Carberry broke the mould. Nina Carberry broke and opened the gate for all the Lisa O'Neills and the Rachel Blackmores and the Katie Walshes. Without Nina Carberry, we wouldn't have Rachel Blackmore. Nina Carberry is the greatest female jockey of all time in Ireland and probably globally in National Hunt. She was an absolute legend. Then we have to move across to Barry Geraghty. Barry Geraghty rode 5 winners in Cheltenham in 2003. Barry Geraghty rode 5 winners in Cheltenham in 2020. Barry Geraghty has ridden a Grand National winner. Barry Geraghty is 4th on the list of all-time winners behind Richard Johnson, and 3rd on the list behind Richard Johnson and Tony McCoy. Barry Geraghty, to me, epitomises National Hunt. He's one of the greatest jockeys of all time. Moscow Flyer, the Kicking Kings, Monty's Pass. And if you ask Barry Geraghty or Paul Carberry, what's the most important winner in your career? What's the one you want on your CV? Not Cheltenham, not Irish Gold Cups. The one they want, the one they all want. And Davy Russell will tell you this. It's a Grand National. Meath men have won Grand Nationals. Barry Geraghty, Paul Carberry. So that means they're right up at the top forever and ever and ever. So for me, I have to have a jockey in on Mount Rushmore.
You're allowed 4. You've got Sean Boylan. Who else is on yours, Hector?
I have to mention Tom Draper, who trained 26 Williams at Cheltenham, a farmer from North County Meath, Donaghmore. He trained the Irish Grand National winner 10 times. He was training for the Duchess of Westminster in the 60s. He trained Arkle and Flying Bolts. Meath is racing country. Meath is football country, and that's it. And to me, my Mount Rushmore is like this. Sean Boylan, when you meet him, gives the positivity and the healing hands. His father was a healer, born on the banks and below the hill of Tara. Sean Boylan could live in Narnia. Sean Boylan is a potion maker, a herbalist. His hands can give the healing touch to a county footballer. I mean, Kieran McGeeney wouldn't have played for so long if he didn't come down every week to Boylan and get about 6 gallons of magic potion that kept McGeeney playing football for years. Sean Boylan, when you meet him, epitomises everything that we are as Meath and Irishmen. Sean Boylan, number 1 on the mountain. Trevor Giles is the greatest footballer ever to play for Meath, hands down. He's, to me, off the pitch, he single-handedly won titles for Screen with Sean McDermott. The two of them, 2 players won titles for Screen senior football. Trevor Giles, for me, goes up on the mountain. Brilliant, brilliant footballer. Jack Quinn, we have to go back to a few. Ken Rennicks, Matty Kerrigan, Pat Reynolds, Peter McDermott, the Red Collier. There's so many good footballers. But Jack Quinn, I have to put up on the mountain. I did a bit of research over the weekend, and they say that Jack Quinn was an absolutely majestic footballer from the town of Kilbride outside of Dunboyne. I have to give thanks and praise to the men that went before all the great teams of the 80s and the 90s. We have to say where the GAA was in the 50s, 60s and 70s, and where these men, when men were men and sheep were nervous, Jack Quinn was an unbelievable footballer. So for all the great Meath men that went before, for all the legendary Meath men that went before, I put Jack Quinn on the mountain. And then my final pick is a horse racing pick. Is it Barry Geraghty? Is it Paul Carberry? Is it Johnny Murtagh? For me, I have to put Johnny Murtagh onto the side of the mountain. He's won 176 million euros in prize money. I made that up. But he's won over 100.
I was like, wow.
100 Group 1 winners. Over 100 Group 1 winners. Johnny Murtagh will go down as a global icon in flat racing. And he has to go on the side of the mountain for me. So my 4 are Sean Boylan, Trevor Giles, Johnny Murtagh, and Jack Quinn. Colin O'Rourke, by the way, done his cruciate as a 19-year-old in the 70s. Came back, played all the way through the 80s and played into the 90s. An absolute legend. Joe Castles. I mean, Martin O'Connell. I mean, there's so many good players there. It was so difficult for me. Darren Fay, Sean McDermott. The Aussies ruined Sean McDermott. The Aussies ruined him. But that's my 4. I have pages and pages and pages and pages. I can't do it anymore, lads. I can't do it anymore. That's my 4.
Okay, they're brilliant 4, actually. Trevor Giles also did his cruciate before coming back to win his 2nd Player of the Year award there, Tommy, in case that would be something that might allow you to correct the mistakes.
I know that, lads.
So
I know that. And look at lads, it's all well and good Hector coming on here as the challenger and looking good. That's easy to do. Like I'm putting in here. And I'll tell you one thing though, I'm absolutely delighted that he could bring that context to horse racing in Meath, because I honestly couldn't offer it. So who are we putting in, Hector? We're putting Johnny Murtagh in for who? Shane Horgan?
Jeez, lads, I forgot to mention Gordon Elliott there, and I forgot to mention Noel Meade. I mean, these trainers, I mean, like, I could go on for racing. We should be doing a racing special here. Gordon Elliott is rewriting the history books. Noel Meade. There's so many. But Tommy, we never mentioned Ollie Murphy either, one of the most skillful full forwards. But we never mentioned... Barney Rock was very close for me, lads. Barney Rock was very close for me going in on Mount Rushmore for Meath.
For being on the Meath Mount Rushmore.
If things were only if things only changed way back in the day. Barney Rock was born just outside Ashbourne in a little village, right near the. Do you know where the Pillow Hotel is?
Yeah.
There's a cross there for the Battle of Ashbourne. Barney Rock was born about a mile down that road. He was an outstanding juvenile footballer for Dunamore Ashbourne in County Meath at the age of 11, 12, 13 and 14. He was the thorn as a juvenile footballer in the side of other clubs. Barney Rock could win games for Dunamore Ashbourne hands down. Everything changed when the then chairman of Meath Football, Pat O'Neill, made a complaint that a Dublin young lad was playing underage football for a club in Meath. And from that day on, and that complaint, Barney Rock then switched his allegiance to Dublin and to Ballymunkickums, and he moved out of Meath because the chairman, Pat O'Neill at the time, put in an objection to him playing underage football for Dunamore at 13 or 14, which means that Barney Rock could have lined out on that great Meath team, which means Dean Rock could have lined out on our great Meath teams, and we could have had the Rocks in their rightful place in the Royal County.
Jesus, that's as good as Kildare sending down Larry Tompkins to Cork. So the rules of this are fairly straightforward. Hector, you get to boot off one of Tommy's. And now, Tommy, are you sticking with your 4? Is that it?
Oh, lads, I don't know. Like,
Tommy, can I just come in for a second? Can I just say I texted Anthony Moyles yesterday to get his take on Tommy's Mount Rushmore, and he said that Tommy had got it bang on. I know we'll get to Mickey Burke's last pitch in a moment as well, but I would definitely stay strong, Tommy, in terms of your own convictions. It hasn't gone well for you for the last half an hour here. There's been very persuasive arguments against you. There have been a lot of arguments for you over the previous 24 hours.
Well, no, I understand that, lads. And I've sat here in the background and I've watched on as many people struggled. They struggled with the decisions, and many people crumbled under the decisions of selecting a Mount Rushmore for their county. I'll be honest, my fourth choice for Shane Horgan, like, no disrespect to him, I knew Shane Horgan would be knocked off by Hector. I presume so, for a racing head, and Johnny Murtagh, Mick Lyons, Graham Geraghty and Sean Boylan is a Mount Rushmore, as a Meath man, I can stand by. I can stand by it, lads. Like, I have spoken to a lot of people over the last week or so, and I don't think there's been the same 4 chosen by any 4 people from Meath. There are so many legends to come from. And Hector's spot on. It's racing country. It's football country. Before we get to Mickey Burke's last pitch, I'm not sure who he's picked. I'd like to say one thing. I'd like to say burn the hurls. I'd like to say ban the Garrison sports. We are just football and just racing in Meath. That's all we want, and the good days will come back.
Namaste. Namaste.
Mickey Burke made a last pitch. I think it's for somebody you're going to be happy with. Tommy, have a look at this.
How are you, lads? I hope you're doing well. Firstly, I hope everyone is safe and sound during this time. Just on the Tommy's, I suppose, nominations for the Mount Rushmore and Meath. Mick Lyons, Barry Geraghty, Sean Boylan, Shane Horgan. It's very hard to disagree with any of them lads. But I'll just throw a few other guys into the mix that came into my head. Sean is obviously going to romp home. You know, the only free man in Meath, probably the most inspirational character of all time, revolutionised football and Meath football in particular, and is an absolute living legend, and it's not too often you can kind of call someone that. Along with Mick Lyons, I would probably throw in a couple of other guys just to throw them into the mix. Mick, an incredible character. I'd probably say Colm O'Rourke, Trevor Giles, would definitely be 2. Martin O'Connell as well, the only man ever to be on Meath man to be on Team of the Millennium. So I definitely think, you know, Trevor, 2 footballers of the year. Colm O'Rourke played for Meath for 19, 20 years. I think they definitely have to be in with a shout. Just in rugby terms, along with Shane Horgan, I think Devon Toner has to be in the mix as well. While Big Dev mightn't have maybe, would say, the same love, would get the same love off purists in the game. I think his career speaks for itself. He's over 70 caps with Ireland. He's probably going to break the record of caps for Leinster. Got the absolute maximum out of himself. Played against him underage for Minalvi, so he's a guy that I'd have huge respect for, and I definitely think that he should be in the reckoning for it as well. I know Shane played for the Lions, so that'll probably maybe, you know, elevate him to a different level, but I definitely think Devon should be in the mix. And the other guy I would have to say should be thrown in, and definitely, in my opinion, probably should be on it, is maybe Johnny Murtagh, the greatest flat jockey of all time. An incredible character, inspirational, came from Bohermeen, no history of horse racing in his family, went down to the school in Kildare, and, you know, pushed Mick Kinane to his absolute limits. So I definitely think Johnny should be worth a crack. He came in to the Meath football team before and gave us numerous inspirational kind of speeches, so I definitely think Johnny is worth a shout as well. But it's everyone's opinion, personal opinions, so they'd definitely be people that will come to my head. You know, we have had no soccer international. I know Darrell Lenihan made his debut last year, but they're just some of my opinions to throw into the mix, and I'll definitely leave the final decision up to you, Tommy, and the lads. All right, thanks very much.
Right, that was good stuff from, I think there's a little bit of confusion about which Geraghty. He made the pitch for Graham Geraghty. He has been successful. I want to say thank you to Hector. It was great stuff. Tommy, you're going to have to live with this for the rest of your life. Best of luck with that. Johnny Murtagh, Sean Boylan, Mick Lyons and Graham Geraghty. It's not a bad Mount Rushmore all told, is it?
Lads, it's an unbelievable Mount Rushmore. It's an unbelievable Mount Rushmore. I don't know if Hector's still with us at the minute, but I'd like to thank him for putting me under unbelievable pressure. I'd love to have Jack Quinn up there, Hector. I'd love to have Trevor Giles up there. I'd love to have Colm O'Rourke up there. I'd love to have Barry Geraghty up there, Nina Carberry. Like, we barely mentioned Gordon Elliott earlier on. We have an unbelievable history of sports people in Ireland, or in Meath, sorry. And, like, that's without going into other sports. And, look, I don't want to make any qualms about it. Like, I couldn't really go too deep into the other sports.
Sorry.
When I first sat down to think about
Hector, you've been involved in radio and TV shows all your life, and you understand that the producer is constantly bitching and whining about the time. You have to finish on time. Tommy is the producer of this show, and we are 15 minutes over, and he dropped an F-bomb in the middle of it 20 minutes after alerting us all to be wary of our language this morning on WhatsApp. I just want to say that.
Can I just leave you with this? Isn't it beautiful to hear Tommy's Meath accent coming out and getting more accentuated as the show goes on? Lads, will you stay safe out there? The blessings of God be on you. There's a wind out there now, lads, that it cut you in two. It was shocking hard to pick them. It was woeful difficult. It was horrid hard at the best of times. Stay safe and mind yourselves. Good luck, and all the best from the Royal County on the rise. I love you. Good luck.
Namaste.
Well, good luck. Well.
Good luck, Hector.
Well. Namaste. Namaste.
And that Mount Rushmore is in the books.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
And indeed, the show is in the books. That was about as difficult as expected, Eoin?
Oh, God, that was excruciating to be Tommy Rooney, I'd say, when you're getting all these truth bombs getting thrown at you from Hector. Hector is some crack, to say the least. I enjoyed that piece thoroughly.
Trevor Giles has to be on that list, though. That's a mistake. He made a mistake. He can fix it again at some point in the future. 13 minutes past 10 this morning here on OTB AM. We've gone way over. We apologise for that, but thanks very much for being with us, and I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you tomorrow. Make sure you tune in this evening from 7 o'clock for further analysis and reaction for the rolling news story that is what's going to happen with the Premier League, the Bundesliga, the return of racing today in Paris, and more about what's going to happen with the GAA. We'll see you tomorrow at 7:30. Until then, best of luck.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.